Chapter 155. 3 months later. In the courtyard of Lingfu, Chen Daoxian looked at the strange-looking cylindrical instrument in his hand, his face full of excitement. Sure enough, Chen Daoxian said excitedly, ever since he obtained the alchemy inheritance and learned the above-mentioned alchemy surgery, Chen Daoxian suddenly wondered if he could learn from some methods from his previous life to refine elixirs. There are several methods of refining medicine pills in the world of immortal cultivation. The mainstream method is fire alchemy. Fire alchemy means that the alchemist uses the alchemy furnace to remove the impurities in the elixir, a little bit with the two flames of civil and military, and finally combines the essence left by the elixir into elixir. To sum it up, there are probably 2 steps: first, removing impurities, and second, synthesizing it into pills. Unlike the alchemy, these 2 steps of alchemy are very difficult. Whether it is to remove the impurities in the elixir, or to finally synthesize the elixir into a pill, the cultivator needs to use his spiritual sense and infuriating qi carefully, and make no mistakes in the middle. Otherwise, the impurities will not be removed cleanly, and the result will be waste pills. Although it is said that the waste pill has a certain medicinal effect, but compared with the medicinal effect, the erysipelas is more terrifying. Eating waste pills to eat dead people is no joke. Similarly, the impurities in the elixir have been removed, and if the final synthesis of the pill is not mastered, it will also fall short. For example, if the heat is not well controlled, and the strong tongue of fire directly burns the elixir to dryness. In short, the failure rate of alchemists in refining medicine pills is often higher than that of alchemists. Theoretically speaking, a batch of medicinal pills can be refined into 10 pills at most. But even an experienced first-order high-grade alchemist would be difficult to refine 10 first-grade low-grade elixir in one furnace, and it would always be necessary to refine a few of them. It's not that the alchemist did it on purpose, but it was too difficult to make 10 pills. To divide a pot of medicinal herbs into 10 parts, the alchemist needs to be distracted at the same time, and remove the impurities from each part of the elixir, and finally combine the 10 parts of the elixir into elixir. In this process, no mistakes can be made. This kind of perverted request is difficult for even a senior alchemist to meet. And Chen Daoxian's whim. In the first step of alchemy, a special instrument called a centrifugal wall breaker was used to remove the impurities in the elixir. The working principle of this instrument is to use the different qualities of different components in the elixir to stratify the different components under the high-speed rotation of the centrifugal wall breaker. Among them, impurities are divided into one layer, and the essence of elixir is divided into another layer. Finally, use gravity to take out the layered elixir essence. In this way, the alchemist does not need to be distracted and control the flame to remove impurities. Waiting for the essence of the elixir to leak out directly under the centrifugal wall breaker, and then synthesizing it into a pill is done. And the alchemist can also control the speed at which the essence of the elixir leaks. For example, some alchemists can synthesize pills at a high speed, so they can adjust the speed at which the essence of the elixir leaks faster by controlling the valve. Some alchemists are slow in synthesizing pills, so they can slow down the speed a bit, which is very humane. In this way, there will be no more wasteful refining of medicinal pills. A traditional alchemist removes the impurities in the 10 pills at the same time, and then concocts 10 pills at the same time. The kind of alchemist that Chen Daoxian envisioned would only need to concentrate on refining one medicinal pill, and the centrifugal wall breaker would do the rest. Under such conditions, just put a pig demon to operate, and it is estimated that practice makes perfect after a long time. After 3 months of experiments, Chen Daoxian finally refined this special magic weapon. According to the function of the centrifugal wall breaker he refined, when refining different medicinal herbs, the alchemist only needs to equip the corresponding number of centrifugal wall breakers according to the quantity of elixir. It is like refining the lowest level first-order low-grade spiritual pill, the Qi Hui pill. 3 elixir are required. At this time, only 3 centrifugal wall breakers are needed to extract the essence of the elixir at the same time. Finally, the essence of the spiritual liquid in the 3 centrifugal wall breakers is taken out from the bottom of the instruments, and then combined into a pill. Greatly improved the alchemy efficiency and success rate of alchemists. And these 2 points are directly related to the profit of the pill. If other alchemists refine a pot of elixir, the success rate is 70%, and you are 100%, the profit gap is huge. The success rate of a pot of elixir is 70%. If the cost is 100 spirit stones, the price is 50 spirit stones, and the profit is 250 spirit stones. If the success rate is 100%, the profit is 400 spirit stones, and the profit rate has suddenly increased by 60%. In addition to the improvement in the efficiency of alchemists, the profit margin is definitely far higher than that of the Chun family's Hongyin magic tool factory, which will become the second pillar industry of the Chun family. It is said that alchemists are the most profitable industry, and they are right. Chen Daoxian secretly said. Beautifully put. The centrifugal wall breaker and the related jade slips for refining this magic tool into the storage bag. Chen Daoxian stood up. It is too late to popularize this magic tool now, because according to the agreement, today happened to be the day when the Zhou family invited colleagues from Guang'an to discuss the formation of a coalition army. Such a long time has passed. With the ability of the Zhou family, it must have been notified to the various families and loose cultivators in Guang'an Prefecture. The annihilation of the entire Zhao family caused a huge panic among the scattered cultivators in Guang'an Prefecture. After all, in the eyes of the loose cultivators, the Zhao family is the second largest family after the Zhou and Yang families, and the number of cultivators in the family is almost the same as that of the Wu family. Such a big family, if it is destroyed, it will be destroyed. Not to mention other small families and loose cultivators. This moment, everyone was apprehensive. There is no impermeable wall in the world, and the news that the Zhao family in Guang'an Prefecture was exterminated soon spread throughout Songzhou. Even the reason for the destruction of the Zhao family was deliberately spread by the Zhou family. The chaos of corpses, the real person, and all kinds of information that made people's eyebrows jump, stimulated the major families of Guang'an Prefecture to restless. Just when the heart is floating, Qianyuan Jianzong sent a message again, turning Songzhou into a new war zone. This time, Songzhou and other Wan Xinghai monks will record their military exploits according to the strength and number of zombies killed. At that time, Qianyuan Jianzong will send special military record personnel to come to Songzhou to record the military exploits. This news immediately caused an uproar in the entire Songzhou cultivation world. Qianyuan Jianzong really didn't care, and took this corpse mess as a test for Songzhou cultivators. Some people of insight can see that there is a certain degree of military training in this. As for why Qianyuan Jianzong wanted to train troops in Songzhou, its purpose is self-evident. Izumo country. Zenangguan. For more than 50 years, Songzhou cultivators lost Zenangguan, which has never been forgotten. On the contrary, with the victories of other fronts, the loss of Zenangguan was particularly dazzling. Coupled with the loss of Zhenan Pass, it poses a serious threat to the defense system built by Qianyuan Jianzong. Therefore, in terms of emotion and reason, Qianyuan Jianzong is bound to take back Zenangguan. Before that, the suppression of the corpse chaos in Guang'an was just a small test for the Songzhou cultivators. If the mere corpse can't be resolved, let alone the recovery of Zenangguan. Anyway, most of the cultivators in the outside world think so. As for Shenzhuezhenren, it was ignored by Qianyuan Jianzong intentionally or unintentionally. Chapter 156. Limba Island. When Chen Daoxian arrived at Lingbei Island, he found that the port of Guang'an was already seriously congested. This was the time when he had seen the most ships in Guang'an port, although there are usually too many of these ships. But at this moment, the sails of Guang'an port are almost larger than the city circle of Guang'an, stretching hundreds of miles on the sea. Feeling the solemn atmosphere of Guang'an Prefecture, Chen Daoxian took a deep breath and flew towards the Zhou family's residence in Xianqing of Guang'an Prefecture. For the sake of convenience, Guang'an Prefecture directly lifted the Forbidden Air formation today. Chen Daoxian remembered that the last time Guang'an Mansion came into contact with the air-forbidding formation was when the merman attacked Guang'an Mansion. It's just that at that time everyone was playing with the mentality of watching a play. But this time everyone was obviously not in the mood to watch the play. After all, the bones of the millions of Zhao family members are not yet cold. The facts of Shui Linlin told them that this time, the catastrophe of the monks in Guang'an Prefecture is coming. The light flashed away, landed at Zhou's residence in the blink of an eye. Speaking of which, this is the second time Chen Daoxian has come to the Zhou family's residence. The last time he came here, he was looking for Zhou Mubai to seek Chen Xian's method of building a foundation. This time, it was for the common destiny of the monks in Guang'an. Although Chen Daoxian knew it well, Qinyuan Jianzong probably arranged a secret hand. But he knew better that Qinyuan Jianzong might sacrifice the monks of Guang'an House in order to destroy the real Xinjue. They are not only the front line on the bright side, but also the bait to lure the gods. If you think that Qinyuan Jianzong has arranged a secret hand, the monks of Guang'an House can sit back and relax, and it is estimated that they will not even know how they died. This point, Zhou clan head and Zhou Mubai also saw clearly. Therefore, their faces are very solemn at the moment, and they don't seem to have a backhand at all. The foundation-building cultivator in Guang'an Mansion couldn't help but feel heavier when he saw the expression on the Zhou family's ancestor, Brother Zhou. Seeing Zhou Mubai, who was welcoming the fellow practitioners in front of the resident palace dojo, Chen Daoxian bowed his hands and said, "Brother Chen." Seeing Chen Daoxian, Zhou Mubai, who had been on the verge of life and death, showed a smile and said, "Go ahead and sit down and talk later." "Okay." Chen Daoxian nodded and walked into the palace. Step into the palace. The interior is almost full of monks. Although this palace is extremely huge, normally it can accommodate tens of thousands of monks. But this time, more base-building monks came to Guang'an, estimated to be nearly 50,000. This time, almost all of the foundation-building cultivators in the loose cultivator group came. There is no way. The psychological impact of the destruction of the Zhao family was too great, and everyone was looking for a backbone at this moment. The powerful Zhou family undoubtedly has the qualifications to be the backbone. As for the Guang'an Immortal League, it is completely ignored by everyone. Usually it's okay to go to Lingzhou City to do business, but when it's time to work hard, you have to look at the Zhou family. No monk is a fool in this matter. Follow Chen Daoxian into the hall. The cultivators who recognized him gave him a place, bowed their heads slightly, and showed a respectful attitude. "This is the second sword cultivator in our Guang'an prefecture?" "Right. I heard that he is a monk from a small family. Really terrifying talent." Everyone communicated with each other and talked a lot. In fact, there is no need to listen carefully. Just by looking at the expressions of the crowd, Chen Daoxian knew that they were talking about him. But Chen Daoxian didn't care at all. With his current strength, he doesn't care about these discussions anymore. Before he knew it, he was no longer on the same level as the foundation establishment monks present. Even if it is the most basic real essence, Chen Daoxian's real essence is far higher than that of the late foundation-building cultivator in terms of quality and quantity. Not to mention the bonus of Kendo realm to strength. For various reasons, Chen Daoxian now stands at the height of a cultivator of the Zifu. Was thinking. A monk from the Zhou family trotted over, bowed his hands at Chen Daoxian, and said, "Senior Chen, where is your position?" This Zhou family cultivator is also a cultivator in the early stage of foundation building, so he actually called him senior. Chen Daoxian knew that all this was a change brought about by strength. If he is not a sword cultivator, but a cultivator in the early stage of foundation establishment, then he is no different from other foundation cultivators in the hall. Not to mention being invited to the high platform of the main hall. A discerning person can see that those who can sit on the high platform are either strong or have a deep family background. There are only a few people in that Chen Daoxian knows. They were Zhou Mingho, the head of the Zhou family, Yang Linyuan, the head of the Yang family, Wu Guangyi, the head of the Wu family, and a Zifu cultivator whom Chen Daoxian had never seen before. It was estimated that he was a Zifu loose cultivator. You must know that it is quite rare for a scattered practitioner to cultivate to the Purple House. At least it is quite rare in Wangxinghai, but it is very common in the battlefield of Izumo. The one in front of him seems to have come back from the battlefield of Izumo on purpose. Because Chen Daoxian was on him, he could feel an aura very similar to Zhou Mucheng. That is a kind of murderous and evil spirit left after a long-term fight. With this murderous aura, just staring at an ordinary foundation cultivator can make the foundation cultivator feel weak. But this murderous aura had no effect on Chen Daoxian. He is someone who has even fought against the zombies who have completed the Purple Mansion. Even if he is far from being the opponent of the Zifu complete zombie, Chen Daoxian can no longer be suppressed by this level of momentum. Even Chen Daoxian could hold Zhou Mubai's aura, let alone the Zifu cultivator in front of him. Glancing at Chen Daoxian, the cultivator of Zifu who was wearing a red Taoist robe, full of red hair, and a face of wanton insolence laughed loudly. It is said that in addition to Zhou Mubai, our Guang'an residence has a second sword cultivator. See you today. Really extraordinary. Brother Zhang is joking. Is there anything ordinary about Jianxiu? Zhou Mingho said with a smile. Yes, of course there is. The cultivator of Zifu, who was called Brother Zhang by Zhou Mingho, shook his head. Jianxiu is also divided into strong and weak. Although Jianxiu claims to be the number one in attacking at the same level, it is not absolutely invincible at the same level. There are ordinary cultivators like me who can rival sword cultivators of the same level. Speaking of this, he paused. Isn't the servant of Shenjue Jinren a typical example? Everyone was silent when they heard him say that God is a real person. Obviously, Shenjue is a taboo for everyone. After all, the damage this person once brought to the family here is too great. Chen Daoxian walked up to the crowd, bowed his hands in a salute, and said, Daoxian has seen all the seniors. Take a seat, Zhou Mingho said with a smile. Chen Daoxian cupped his hands again and sat on the seat. His seat was arranged between Wu Guangyi and Zhou Mingho, the second position from the top. Sitting high on the throne of the main hall, looking down at the monks below, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but feel a different feeling in his heart. Today's seat not only symbolizes strength, but also the status of each family in Guang'an in the future. Unconsciously, the Chen family on Shuanghu Island has come to where it is today under the influence of Chen Daoxian. Chapter 157. You fellows. Inside the main hall, Zhou Mingho, the head of the Zhou family, resounded throughout the audience, and immediately suppressed the buzzing discussion below. Chen Daoxian sat on the throne of the high platform, looking at the dark crowd below, silent. Seeing that the hall has returned to quiet, Zhou Mingho nodded and continued. Everyone should know that the entire Zhao family was destroyed 3 months ago. Today, I, the Zhou family, the Yang family, the Wu family, and the Chen family invite all of you to come here, just to discuss how to solve the corpse on Lianhua Island. Mess. If you have any opinions, you can put them forward now. The words fall. There was another quarrel below. Cough. The mana was agitated, and everyone felt their whole body tighten slightly, and the hall became quiet again. Zhou Laozu, at this time, a loose cultivator in the later stage of foundation building, stood up and cupped his hands. Since our Guang'an people are gathered here today, we must be willing to obey the leadership of the Zhou family. So, what to do next? The Zhou family just comes up with the articles of association and it'll just do it. It's extremely, your Zhou family said, we will do it accordingly. Right? The response below became a chorus. Seeing this scene, Zhou Mingho nodded with satisfaction and said, that being the case, I suggest that our Guang'an monks form a coalition army, which will be led by my Zhou family, and invite the powerful monks from Guang'an Prefecture to be the leaders, command this army of monks, and wipe out the corpses on the Lotus Island together. Okay. That's a good move. That's a good idea. In the main hall, the cultivators kept nodding their heads. Chen Daoxian didn't need to look at it to know that those who took the lead in speaking among these loose cultivators were basically arranged by the Zhou family deliberately. Of course. In essence, everyone hopes to follow the Zhou family and survive this catastrophe safely. Otherwise, the monks in Guang'an Mansion are not fools. How could they find a few supporters to make them follow him? Since everyone agrees to form a coalition army, then I hereby announce that the Guang'an Prefecture Coalition Force will be officially established immediately. Say it. Zhou Mingho continued. Cultivators who are interested in joining the coalition army can sign up to join the army at my Zhou family cultivator after this meeting. Although they are not on the front line of the Izumo Kingdom in this battle against the corpse tide, they can also obtain military exploits. Said. He pointed to the red-haired Taoist beside him and said loudly, this is Dao Yuzhang, who was transferred from the front line by Qianyuan Jianzong, who is responsible for recording everyone's military exploits. Many of the loose cultivators present have been to the battlefield of Izumo. Naturally know the military merit system of Qianyuan Jianzong. It can be said that the military merit system of Qianyuan Sword Sect is the biggest reason why one Xinghai loose cultivator can rise in just 400 years. Otherwise, with the monopoly of the cultivators in Wangxinghai on the resources of the cultivators, let alone the rise of the loose cultivators, even the aura of ordinary cultivation cannot be guaranteed. The Taoist surnamed Zhang heard the words, stood up, bowed his hands to everyone, and then sat down. Everyone seemed to be unfamiliar with this cultivator of the Z residence surnamed Zhang, and after looking at him curiously, they stopped paying attention. Everyone still trusts the fairness of Qianyuan Jianzong's record of military exploits. This is the foundation of Qianyuan Jianzong's attack on Izumo, and there can be no problems. Look everyone. Zhou Minghe waved his sleeves and saw a vivid map of light and shadow appearing in everyone's sight over the hall. Chen Daoxuan's eyes narrowed, and he immediately recognized that this map of light and shadow was the map of Guang'an Prefecture. The center of the map is Limba Island at the foot of everyone. Lingbi Island is highlighted on the light and shadow map. Except Lingbei Island, the east of the map is the Lotus Island occupied by the corpses, and the northwest of the Lotus Island is the Wu family's Fengwu Island. The three islands of Lingbei Island, Wuxia Fengwu Island and Lianhua Island of Zhou's family, just formed a zigzag-shaped terrain on the map. Yangzjinwu Island is above Lingbei Island, which is due north. As for the Shuanghu Island of the Chen family, it is the farthest from everyone, and it is located in the rear of Guang'an Prefecture, which is due west of Lingbei Island. Theoretically, for the corpse tied on Lotus Island to spread to the Chen family Shuanghu Island, the three defense lines of the Wu family, the Zhou family and the Yang family must be broken. With the Sun brothers' mere two purple houses, it is obviously impossible to achieve. Inside the main hall, Zhou Minghe continued, according to the terrain, I divided Guang'an Prefecture into 5 defense areas, namely the Central Defense Area, the Eastern Defense Area, the Southern Defense Area, the Northern Defense Area, and the Western Defense Area. Zhou Minghe paused. You can also see from the map that the Eastern Defense Zone has direct contact with Lotus Island, and will also be the front line of our coalition to fight against the corpse tied on Lotus Island. Therefore, the commander of this defense must have extraordinary strength. Therefore, I recommend my Zhou family Qianjiao Zhou Mubai to be the commander of this defense area. After Zhou Minghe looked around the people in the hall, everyone nodded. The shadow of the famous tree, Zhou Mubai assumed the post of the commander of the Eastern Defense Zone, and no one objected. In fact, even if Zhou Gol served as the commander of the coalition, no one would object. After all, Zhou Mubai's strength is there, and he was able to rank in the Zifu Qianjiao list at the age of less than 100 years old. His achievements were all killed by the flying sword in his hand. Seeing that there is no objection from the crowd, Zhou Minghe continued to announce, the Central Defense Zone will be located on Lingbei Island, and I will be in charge of the old man himself, and the commander of the Southern Defense Zone will be Zhou Mingyue, the third elder of the Zhou family. The Northern Defense Area is led by Yang Linyuan Yang Daoyu. As for the Western Defense Area, Zhou Minghe paused. Chen Daoxian Chen Daoyu will be the leader. Boom! It is good to say that in the end, the commander of the Western Defense Zone suddenly caused an uproar off the field. Immediately, some monks stood up against it. Zhou Laozu, we don't have any opinion on the arrangement of your first 4 defense zone commanders, but the candidates for the commander of the Western Defense Zone are still up for discussion. Yeah, old ancestor Zhou, although Dao Yuchun is a sword cultivator, but after all, he is only a foundation-building cultivator. Why not send a cultivator from the Zhou family to be the commander of the Western Defense Zone? Patriarch Zhou, fellow Daoist Chan, I Lei Zhan, have a straight temper, don't take offense, I think, isn't this a nonsense? That is, let's choose the senior Zifu from the Zhou family to be the commander of the Western Defense Zone. Chen Daoxian couldn't help frowning when he saw the indignant rants of the monks in Guang'an Mansion. He didn't know why he became the commander of the Western Defense Zone. Although the Western Defense Zone is in the rear, basically there will be no wars, but it is a bit difficult to convince the commander to have a foundation-building cultivator assume the position. It is also a loss that Chen Daoxian is a sword cultivator, and his combat power is far superior to that of the cultivators of the same rank. Otherwise, some cultivators of the foundation establishment period might come out and ask him for advice. As long as Chen Daoxian is defeated, even old ancestor Zhou cannot continue to push him to be the commander of the Western Defense Zone. Seeing that everyone was so opposed to Chen Daoxian as the commander of the Western Defense Zone, Zhou Minghe also had a headache. Let Chen Daoxian serve as the commander of the Western Defense Zone, and Zhou Minghe naturally has his own considerations. Chapter 158. Compared to the other 4 zones, the Western Defense Zone is the least likely to encounter war, And there are no decent big families in the west of Lingbei Island, let alone the cultivators of the Zifu. If you want to take care of the western defense area, you can only send cultivators from the Zifu from the Zhou family. Only, how can the Zhou family dare to divide too much of the Zifu battle power out? You must know that it is not only the Sun brothers who are full of strength in the Purple Mansion, but also the peerless murderer Shanju Zhenren. At that time, once the warrior roads, Lingbei Island and other spiritual veins in the Zhou family's jurisdiction were attacked, and the Zhou family might not even be able to recruit the cultivators of the Zifu. Thus, it might be better not to split up at the beginning, but to concentrate on the eastern and central zones, especially the eastern defense zone headed by Zhou Mubai. Say it again. The main purpose of setting up the western zone is not combat. It is to prevent this group of sinister things from passing through the Wangxinghai underwater world and attack the rear islands of Guang'an Prefecture, disrupting the deployment of Guang'an Prefecture's coalition forces. In this way, the strength requirements for the western defense zone are not so high. With Chen Daoxuan's strength, he is fully qualified for this position. Without any choice. After Zhou Mingho's voice transmission communicated with Chen Daoxian, he said with a tough attitude, "Since you agreed to join the coalition army, you must abide by the rules set by my Zhou family, otherwise you should ask for another one." This time, everyone is no longer noisy. They gathered here not to seek shelter from the Zhou family. Now in the entire Guang'an mansion, except for the Zhou family, no other family can give them a sense of security. Now look at old ancestor Zhou's anger, how everyone dared to talk. But there are always those who are not afraid of death. Lei Zhan is a typical example of a loose cultivator, who is not afraid of death. Seeing him jumping out of the crowd, he cupped his hands and said, "Ancestor Zhou, everyone, I am willing to join the coalition, but I am unwilling to accept the leadership of a monk in the early stage of foundation building. They all say that swordsmen attack Wushuang, and I have not learned Lei Zhan before." Saying that, he looked at Chen Daoxian with burning eyes. "Lei Zhan, you bastard." Zhou Mingho was very angry with him. But thinking of Lei Zhan's reputation among loose cultivators, it's not easy to drive him out at this moment. After all, this time to exterminate the corpse tide, the cultivators of Guang'an Mansion must work together, especially the large number of loose cultivators. And Lei Zhan is one of the representative figures in the foundation building scattered cultivator. This moment, Chen Daoxian knew that he could no longer be silent. To a certain extent, the division of several major defense zones in Guang'an Prefecture is also the sphere of influence of the major families of Guang'an Prefecture in the future. Unconsciously, the Chen family has reached the point where they can divide the cake under the hands of the Zhou family. Have to say, compared with the time when he and Chen Xianhe carefully visited the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion, the change was too great. Chen Daoxian knew that all of this stemmed from his own strength and potential, not the strength of the Chen family. If not, how does the Zhou family push a cultivator in the early stage of foundation building to be the commander of the Western Defense Zone? Think of this. Chen Daoxian stood up from the throne on the high platform. His voice was soft, but it rang in everyone's ears. "Fellow Taoist Lei Zhan, right? Heard." Lei Zhan cupped his hands and grinned. "Exactly. I don't know what kind of strength you think is qualified to be the commander of the Western Defense Zone?" This. Lei Zhan was stunned. He just felt that Chen Daoxuan's cultivation was lower than his, so he rejected him as the commander of the Western Defense Zone from his heart. But Lei Zhan knew that Chen Daoxian should be stronger than him in terms of strength. This point, just look at Zhou Mubai. The first floor of the Purple Mansion will be able to beat the Purple Mansion to death in the later stage. On the third floor of the Purple Mansion it was 1-4, and 2 of the Purple Mansion were complete. Not only that, with 1 enemy in 4, you can also press the opposite side to fight. One can imagine how terrifying Jian Xiao is. In a heads-up match, Lei Zhan is naturally not an opponent, but he doesn't admit it, and said in front of everyone, "It's nothing as long as your strength can convince me." He was talking about convincing, not defeating him. The difference here is huge. Chen Daoxian even hung him up and hammered him, but he was not convinced, but it was still useless. Of course, at that point the other loose cultivators wouldn't continue to accompany Lei Zhan. After all, other scattered cultivators were dissatisfied with Chen Daoxuan's position as the commander of the Western Defense Zone, which was based on a lack of understanding of his strength. if Chen Daoxuan's strength is strong enough. Of course, no one objected. In the final analysis, as the commander of the major defense areas, it is still the individual strength of the monk. In this regard, family heritage has to stand aside. For example, in the Wu family, no one is the commander of the major defense areas. After all, the strongest Wu family is just an ordinary foundation-building cultivator. Putting it in front of the Zifu cultivator is simply not enough to see. Chen Daoxian nodded. Since that's the case, it's better for you and me to discuss it. Okay, have fun. Lei Zhan shouted, go. This place is too small to be used. You can go out with me. Heard. Chen Daoxian shook his head. Seeing this, Lei Zhan sneered. Why, you are afraid? Do not. Chen Daoxian said indifferently. I think it's pretty good here. There's no need to go out so troublesome. It's good here. Lei Zhan frowned. What do you mean? It's no fun. Are you going to fight? With that said, Chen Daoxian flew to the center of the hall, took out the flying sword of life and kept spinning around him. Lei Zhan was agitated by him, and he didn't care that this was the inside of the main hall. Directly, the imperial envoy Feijian attacked him. Who knows, Feijian pierced Chen Daoxuan's figure, but not even a drop of blood came out. Not good. Lei Zhan was vigilant in his heart, raised his consciousness to the limit, desperately trying to find the trace of Chen Daoxian, but found nothing. Next moment, a voice entered Lei Zhan's ears. Too slow. When the words fell, a mouthful of Feijian Jianmong was swallowed, hovering on Lei Zhan's neck, and a strand of hair slowly fell. Chen Daoxian stood less than 3 meters away from him. Spike. At the beginning, Chen Daoxian used the technique of transforming his body into sword light to deal with the zombie, but it was difficult to cause damage to the opponent. But to deal with the Foundation Establishment cultivator, it is simply a one-sided killing. Lei Zhan didn't even react at all, and was put on his neck by Feijian. If the two really fight, doesn't it mean that Chen Daoxian can kill him with a single sword? Thinking of this, Lei Zhan couldn't help shivering. I thought he was at the top level among the Foundation Establishment cultivators, if not the strongest. But unexpectedly, Chen Daoxian was defeated by a sword. This feeling is very uncomfortable. Although Lei Zhan did not use all means, why did Chen Daoxian use all means? In this way, the real strength gap between the two may be even greater. Are you convinced? Chen Daoxian took the flying sword of his life back to the Sea of Qi in his dantian and asked. Hearing this, Lei Zhan bowed his hands in a salute, and said, Master Chief Kendo Wushuang, your subordinates are naturally convinced. Chapter 159. The Zhou family's work efficiency is very high. Soon, the matter of the Guang'an Prefecture allied forces was completed by the Zhou family. The registration of Guang'an monks to join the army is also proceeding in an orderly manner. The residence of the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture. Inside a fancy fairy palace. Here, for the time being, it is the headquarters of the Guang'an Prefecture allied forces. Within it, the commanders of the 5 defense zones and the cultivator Zhang Zifu, who counted the military exploits, sat together to discuss the specific matters of the coalition forces. The one sitting in the first place was naturally Zhou Mingho, the head of the Zhou family and the commander of the Guang'an Prefecture coalition forces. Zhou Mingho glanced at the crowd with brows and frowned. This coalition seems to be very powerful, but there are far more problems than we imagined. He paused. Although the specific number of the coalition forces has not yet been determined, the military expenditure must be an astronomical sum. Just like the war among mortals, the monk army also needs to consume military expenses. The military expenditures here include the consumption of personal instruments, medicinal pills, magic talismans, large-scale war instruments, array materials, spiritual meridian stations, and so on. Although Qinyuan Jianzong provided a military merit system for the monks of Guang'an House, which could offset part of the military expenses. However, the major families in Guang'an Prefecture must also make a big deal of blood, especially the Zhou family who took the lead. In fact, it is normal to think about it. During the period of stability in Guang'an Prefecture, the Zhou family occupied the greatest interests, and when the catastrophe came, the Zhou family must also bear the greatest responsibility. Otherwise, once Guang'an Prefecture falls, the Zhou family will lose more than just the military spending. I heard this. Yang Linyuan on the side said, I wonder how many spirit stones Zhou Dao can take out? Zhou Mingho glanced at him, thought for a moment and said, "Our Zhou family can take out 40,000 spirit stones for this military expense." Heard. Yang Linyuan shook his right hand slightly and sighed. "In this case, I, Guang'an Xianmeng, are also willing to take out 10 million spirit stones as military expenses." As he said that, he bowed his hands to everyone and said, "My Guang'an Immortal Alliance has spent a lot of money to build Spirit Day City. 10,000 spirit stones are already the greatest sincerity. Please don't dislike it." After that, I apologized again. When Chen Daoxian, who was sitting with them, heard this, he suddenly felt that the chair under his was quite hot, and he was a little restless. How does this make him answer? One family produced 400 million spirit stones, the other 100 million spirit stones. When did the spirit stone use billions as a unit? Chen Daoxian finally understood why the big family despised the low-end magic weapon market. In exchange, his Chen family has so many spirit stones, and he doesn't look down on the low-end magic weapon market. The low-end magic weapon market earns tens of millions of spirit stones a year. Can that be called making money? Shabby. He lowered his head, feeling out of tune with everyone here. Fortunately, everyone knew the situation of his Chen family on Shuanghu Island, and they didn't expect them to pay this military expense. The reason why Chen Daoxian can sit here is not so much that his strength is amazing, but his potential is amazing. There are very few short-sighted people who can become the patriarch of a big family in Wan Xinghai. Not Zhou Mingho nor Yang Linyuan. They all know that Chen Daoxian's achievements in the future are bound to be even more amazing than they are now. Whether it is the Zhou family or the Yang family, showing favor to Chen Daoxian and the Chen family is investing in the future. This point, very important for big family. The connections may not work in normal times, but at the critical moment, they might be able to save the family. The chaos of the gods. So many families have been annihilated. Why did the Zhou family wait for the timely rescue of Qinyuan Jianzong? Just because the Zhou family was lucky? Not necessarily. Seeing Yang Linyuan's statement, Zhou Mingho nodded and continued. In this case, we will have a total of 500 million military spending. Although this military expenditure is not much, it is enough to support it for a period of time. Hearing this, everyone nodded. That being the case, I will simply make a division of this military expenditure. Hear this. Everyone cheered up. Especially Chen Daoxian. He is the commander of the Western Defense Area, in charge of the security inspection and defense work in the western area of Guang'an Prefecture. There will inevitably be a part of the military expenses, but I don't know if I can get 10 million spirit stones. Chen Daoxian also knew. In this battle, the Eastern Defense Zone headed by Zhou Mubai will definitely receive the most military expenditure. Because in the early stage, only their defense zone had to fight directly against the zombies on Lotus Island. As for the other defense areas, the main purpose is to prevent the corpses from Lianhua Island from jumping off the wall. Caused internal instability in Guang'an Prefecture. In other words, the only real fighting force in Guang'an Prefecture was the Eastern Defense Zone led by Zhou Mubai. The other defense areas are reserve forces, especially the Western Defense Area in charge of Chen Daoxian, which is a guard force. He was satisfied that he could get 10 million spirit stones for the military. See everyone cheer up. Zhou Mingho opened his mouth and said, Mubai's Eastern Defense Zone is divided into 250 million spirit stones because it has to fight directly against the corpses on Lotus Island. Daoyuyang's Northern Defense Area is backed by Lingruwei City, and there is no need to spend military expenses on garrisoning the spiritual veins, so it is a little less, only 70 million spiritual stones. As for my Lingbei Island, all kinds of defense measures are perfect, and the military expenditure is less, only 50 million spirit stones are enough. The southern defense area of Mingyan is located in the hinterland below Guang'an Prefecture, and it is less likely to be exposed to war, so only 50 million spirit stones are needed. As for the western zone, everyone turned their attention to Chen Daoxian, and their eyes were full of meaningful colors. As far as I know, Shuanghu Island is located in a territory with few spiritual veins. If you choose to garrison there, you will have to spend a lot of spirit stones to build the spiritual veins plus other consumption, so you need to invest a little more, just tentatively set 80 million spirit stones. Zhou Mingho said indifferently. Who knows that Chen Daoxian's heart pounded when he heard this. Although this spiritual stone is military expenses, not his personal property. But as commander of the Western Defense Zone, He has the power to decide how to spend the money. In the end, the vast majority of this money must not slowly fall into the Chen family's pocket. If it weren't for the threat of the real person Shenju, how could the Guang'an family be willing to pay such a large amount of blood? Chen Daoxian really felt like he was getting rich from heaven. In his heart, his affection for Zhou Mingho, who insisted on letting him be the commander of the Western Defense Zone, soared. Compared to Yang Linyuan giving him a mouthful of a third-tier high-grade flying sword, Zhou Mingho gave him this great gift, which is called a pattern. However, the righteousness of this gift was so dignified that no monk in Guang'an Prefecture could say a word. Because before in the hall, it is not that no monks objected to Chen Daoxian as the commander of the Western Defense Zone, but he was defeated by Chen Daoxian directly. When he was this commander, he was recognized by the cultivators. Seeing Chen Daoxian's grateful eyes, Zhou Mingho smiled and nodded to him. Smart people don't always need too many words. This eye contact alone means that the Chen family and his Chen Daoxian have accepted each other's favor. Can be said. This astronomical military spending is too timely. Although the Chen family now has a low-end magic tool business, but unfortunately the production capacity is still somewhat insufficient. Therefore, in a short period of time, it is difficult for the Chen family to obtain a large number of spirit stones. In addition, now that the cultivators of the Fuzi generation are gradually embarking on the path of immortality, the first-order spiritual veins of the Chen family have gradually been unable to meet the needs of the cultivators of the Chen family. The construction of second-order spiritual veins has also been put on the agenda. A second-order spiritual vein requires 1 million spiritual stones. After this spirit stone flower goes out, the spirit stone in the Chen family's clan library is estimated to have bottomed out. It even has to sell some of the spirit ore stored by the family. This time, with 80 million spirit stones, the Chen family can do much more. Although this spiritual stone is only military expenses and not Chen Daoxian's personal property, he can use this spiritual stone for various investments. For example, the most basic spiritual investment, Lingmai investment, is an investment that the world of immortals will never lose. The various spiritual veins built by the Yang family within a 10,000 li radius of Lingdai City have confirmed this truth. With this huge spiritual stone, Chen Daoxian also intends to implement the same plan. That is, with Shuanghu Island as the core, within a radius of 10,000 miles, to build spiritual veins. Of course, how to use the constructed spiritual veins depends on the actual situation. But compared with the Yang family, the Chen family has a huge advantage, that is, the ability to quickly process raw materials such as spirit ore and spirit medicine into products. This advantage has no semicolon in the entire Wangxinghai, and even the entire immortal world. In Chen Daoxian's eyes, this world is too powerful due to the power of monks. As a result, the monks were too superstitious about their own power and ignored the power of the machine. But he is different. As a transmigrator, he has a worldview and cognition that is completely different from this world. In other words, he knew the strengths and weaknesses of both worlds. What Chen Daoxian has to do is to use the strengths of the previous world to make up for the shortcomings of this world. The shortcomings of this world refer to far more than just productivity, including institutional, economic, and even cultural. Only, if you want to change all this, you need to build on your own strength, otherwise it will be empty talk. Just like the Zhao family, it disappeared in the dust of history with a little wave. Out of the main hall of the coalition headquarters, Chen Daoxian was floating when he walked. "Brother Chen." Behind him, Zhou Mubai's voice suddenly sounded. "Brother Zhou." When Chen Daoxian saw each other, it was the same as seeing his relatives. This feeling is not only because he and Zhou Mubai have a relationship of life and death, but also because of the huge sum of money that the Zhou family sent him just now, making him feel extremely cordial when he sees everyone in the Zhou family. Seeing Chen Daoxian's appearance, Zhou Mubai shook his head with a smile, and said jokingly, "I didn't expect you to have such a wealthy side." Hear this. Chen Daoxian was immediately unhappy and said, "Brother Zhou, you were born in a big family. How do you know the suffering of our small monks?" Shaking his head, he said sternly, "Brother Zhou is going to attack Lotus Island. Do you have any specific plans?" Hear this. Zhou Mubai pondered for a moment and said, "My plan is very simple. Fortify the walls and clear the fields." Fortified walls and clear fields? Chen Daoxian couldn't help frowning. Why don't you attack Lotus Island directly? Chapter 160 Hurt. Zhou Mubai shook his head. Although the tide of corpses currently entrenched on Lotus Island is not that strong, the real Shenjue lurking in the dark is a big trouble, and we don't know if the real Shenjue has left behind. It is not a good idea to rashly attack Lotus Island. Chen Daoxian frowned and said, but according to our last investigation, Lotus Island should have only 2 complete zombies of the Purple Palace and 3 zombies of the early Purple Palace. It's not that simple, Zhou Mubai said as he walked. Have you found it? The 3 zombies in the early stage of Zifu are all monks from the Wu and Zhao families. You mean? Chen Daoxian was suddenly shocked. You must know that the Wu family and the Zhao family have no Zifu cultivators. That is to say, the 2 zombies in the early Zifu were promoted to the Zifu combat power after death. But how long have they been dead? Even the longest Wu family cultivator has only been dead for a few months, and the Zhao family cultivator has just died not long ago. In such a short period of time, the corpse of a base-building cultivator was forcibly refined into a Zifu zombie, which meant that the real person of Shenjue could mass-produce the battle power of Zifu. Think of this. Chen Daoxian only felt horrified. Qinyuan Jianzong wants the monks of Guang'an House to lead out the real person Shenju, which might be the rhythm that the whole monks of Guang'an House will be wiped out. For this situation, of course, the Guang'an House cultivator was unwilling to act as such an early bird. So the Zhou family came up with the idea of withdrawing all the monks from Lotus Island close to Guang'an House. Fortunately, the people living on these islands are scattered cultivators and children of small families, and there are very few spiritual veins. It's just that there are so many mortals. In order to transport these mortals, the Zhou family and the Yang family spent a lot of energy before transferring these people to the spiritual veins within 10,000 miles of Lingbei Island. After removing these mortals and low-level monks, Zhou Mubai will build several strong defense lines on Lianhu Island to several islands of Wu and Zhou families to prevent the corpse tide from spreading to Guang'an Prefecture. Thus, feeling the pressure exerted by Guang'an Prefecture, the corpse tide is likely to spread in the opposite direction of Guang'an Prefecture. The opposite direction from Lotus Island to Guang'an Mansion is the direction of Cangzhou Xianqing. There is the clan of the first family in Cangzhou, the Yi family. This is also the real plan of the Guang'an Prefecture allied forces, to bring disaster to the east. As for whether the Yi family chose to block the corpse tide like Guang'an Mansion, or directly send monks to exterminate them, it had nothing to do with Guang'an Mansion. Zhou Mubai only needs to firmly hold the Guang'an Prefecture defense line. As for the suffering of the Yi family, Zhou Mubai didn't have time to applaud, so how could he send an army of monks to help them? Moreover, when the Yi family suffered, Zhou Mubai did not believe that the Qinyuan sword sect would remain indifferent. Hearing this explanation, Chen Daoxian and Zhou Mubai smiled at each other. The Yi family has too many enemies. The Zhou family has a grudge against the Yi family, the Chen family has a grudge against the Yi family, and the Yang family does the same. In Cangzhou, there may not be a few families that do not have grudges with the Yi family. The next days, Chen Daoxian selected the soldiers in the Western Defense Zone, and then returned to Sequoia Island with these soldiers. This time, in order to support the Western Defense Zone, the Zhou family has seconded 10 Spirit Void battleships. Now, on each of the Spirit Void battleships, there are 100 Foundation Establishment cultivators. Add up, there are 1,000 base-building cultivators stationed in the Western Defense Zone, and this does not include ordinary soldiers in the Qi refining period. There are nearly 100,000 monks in the entire Western Defense Zone. This is just the smallest of the zones. There was no way, in order to deal with the corpse tide and the real person, the monks in Guang'an had to unite. This is just the transfer of the monks. In Guang'an Mansion, behind every cultivator, there is a large group of mortals serving him. Whether it is a family cultivator or a loose cultivator, this is basically the same. Behind the family monks, there are naturally an extremely large number of clansmen. And behind the loose cultivator, there are also a large number of slaves. Even these slaves will build cities and reproduce offspring under the protection of loose cultivators. After several generations of reproduction, the descendants of slaves generally no longer have the identity of slaves, and will automatically become ordinary civilians. Until then, these commoners may embark on the path of cultivation under the advice of loose cultivators. This is also the biggest source of Wan Xinghai's scattered cultivation. Family monks use blood as a link to reproduce offspring and cultivate monks. The advantage of doing this is that the clan is united and has a strong centripetal force. On the other hand, loose cultivators support themselves with ordinary civilians or slaves. It is possible that before his death, he will accept a few disciples and pass on the mantle. However, because the disciples do not have deep feelings, they often become passers-by in the future. If the loose cultivator who left the inheritance is powerful enough, such as the Tao lineage left by a certain Mahayana true immortal, it will be different. Such inheritance often eventually evolves into a sect, rather than disappearing after a generation or two. Of course, in the world of immortality, it is not surprising that sects have declined and eventually disappeared. For example, the Qianyuan sword sect is a line of Taoism left by a Mahayana true immortal, and then slowly developed to the point where it is today. There are also powerful people in the Shoshin family, and they are not weaker than the sect. Actually, in this world, no matter what kind of cultivation power it is, it has its own advantages and disadvantages. The advantage of the clan's cultivation force is that the clansmen are united enough, but the disadvantage is that it is inevitable that they will treasure themselves. And the cultivation force of the sect is much more tolerant than the family. As long as they are talented immortals within the sphere of influence, regardless of blood, they will be cultivated in the sect before a certain age. As such, in terms of the choice of disciples, they are inherently much broader than the family power. In addition, their inheritance is not weak. Generally speaking, the power of the sect in the Xiuxian world is larger than that of the family. For example, Qianyuan Jianzong such as Zhuaniangzong such as Qinghui Taoist School such as Qianji Temple etc. However, the development of the sect power also has its drawbacks, that is, the system is not perfect, and after it can only grow to a certain extent, it has to rely on the family power to rule the territory under its command. This will inevitably lead to instability in governance. Don't look at Qianyuan Jianzong's extremely firm control of Wan Xinghai. That is under the premise that its momentum is unparalleled for a while. When Qianyuan Jianzong shows a slight decline, the major families of Wan Xinghai will inevitably violate its laws. Not only Wan Xinghai, but also the clan forces under the other sects of Xianyunzhu are basically the same. Someone might say, that being the case, why not completely abolish the family system and bring the entire territory under the rule of the sect? It can only be said that this idea is very beautiful, but in fact it is impossible. This world is somewhat similar to the ancient society of Chun Daoxuan's previous life, but it is completely different internally. The biggest difference is that this world is a world where great power is attributed to itself. Humans are the most contradictory creatures. They may sacrifice their lives for their ideals and the forces they belong to, but they also have no bottom line for future generations. If Qianyuan Jianzong had ruled Wan Xinghai, it would have completely wiped out all the families. What will happen next is almost predictable. Will the high-level officials in Qianyuan sword sect have descendants? Certainly. Do these high-level descendants choose to be placed in Qianyuan Jianzong, or driven out? Generally speaking, in order to maintain the long-term stability of the denomination, the denomination seldom devotes resources to the high-ranking children. Because of this, after a few generations, the sect became a union of several families, and after several generations of fighting, it finally became a family. The senior sect officials will naturally not sit back and watch this happen. As a result, the descendants of the high-ranking sects often go out independently to open up a cultivator family. In this way, the problem returned to its original point, and the Shoshin family was born again. Therefore, it is not that the family system is not abolished but that there is no way to cancel it. On the deck of the Spirit Void battleship, Chun Daoxian looked at Zhou Muqing and Zhou Xiliang who were standing beside him, and said with a smile, "Uncle Zhou, Brother Xiliang, follow me to Sequoia Island this time, but you have to start all over again. Haha. I'm already satisfied that I can save my life. Besides, now that you are under your command, nephew, can you still treat my father and son badly?" Zhou Muqing laughed. "That's not so," Chun Daoxian said with a smile, "but Brother Xiliang is estimated to be very uncomfortable with Sequoia Island. Brother Chun, don't scare me." Zhou Xiliang had a sullen look on his face. "It won't really be a wild place. The wild places are not enough, but there is no place for fun." "That's a good feeling," Zhou Muqing immediately applauded and laughed when he heard this. Hearing this, Zhou Siliang immediately put on a bitter face. The crowd laughed a few times. Behind him, a cultivator in armor came over and cupped his hands. Lord Commander, Sequoia Island is coming soon, heard. Chen Daoxian glanced at the red island below his eyes and nodded. I see. Yes. Lei Zhen cupped his hands and stepped back. This late foundation building loose cultivator named Lei Zhen seemed to be convinced by Chen Daoxian, and followed Chen Daoxian to Sequoia Island. Although there are as many as 1,000 base building cultivators here, but most of them are early-stage foundation building cultivators, and even the middle-stage foundation building cultivators are few in number. As for the later stage of foundation building, there were only Zhou Muqing and Lei Zhen. These two, one is the 7th floor of the foundation building, and the other is the 8th floor of the foundation building. This strength is not too shabby compared to Zhou Muqing in the Eastern Defense Zone. However, the main function of the Western Defense Zone is to patrol, and it does not require frontline combat. This power is more than enough for patrol. Even if it weren't for Chen Daoxian, the Zhou family would be able to handle this trivial matter, and there was no need to establish any Western Defense Zone. It's just that the Chen family Shuanghu Island is here. In order to have a harmonious relationship between the two families in the future, the Zhou family will naturally plan their spheres of influence in advance to avoid conflicts between the two parties in the future. This Western defense area is not so much a defense area as it is the sphere of influence of the Chen family. In other words, now with Shuanghu Island as the center, the sea area with a radius of more than 10,000 miles will be the sphere of influence of the Chen family. Compared to the time when he could only traverse a few nearby islands, the Chen family's sphere of influence has expanded more than 100 times. It's just that the sphere of influence is now expanded, but the Chen family still faces a problem, that is, there is a shortage of manpower, and it is seriously insufficient. Chapter 161. Boom! The Spirit Void battleship pierced the sky. Soon, one after another, the Spirit Void battleships landed on Sequoia Island in an orderly manner. One after another, the lights flew off the battleship, and when everyone saw the scene in front of them, they couldn't help but look at each other. It's actually a desert island. You must know that the cultivators present have the lowest cultivation base in the early stage of foundation building. With their cultivation base, the worst one has a first-order spiritual vein to supply them for cultivation. A completely deserted island makes them feel very uncomfortable, who are used to seeing high-level spiritual veins. Seeing Zhong Xiu's disappointed eyes, Chen Daoxian boosted his morale and said, although the island under our feet is a deserted island, the island is huge, not much smaller than Lingbei Island, Jinwu Island and other large islands. It is suitable to be used as the resident of our Western Defense Zone. Besides, as long as there is a spiritual stone, it can be cultivated, so there is no need to worry. I plan to cultivate a third-order spiritual vein here for the garrison of our Western Defense Zone. Third-order spiritual veins? That's not the same as the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, and the immortal city of Lingri. I mean, it is also one of the 5 defense areas, and we are not too much worse than others. It seems that we may still take advantage of it. You must know that we have the fewest people in our defense zone, which means that each of us has the most aura resources. Well said. Seeing everyone regain their morale, Chen Daoxian nodded slightly. Another important reason why he chose Sequoia Island as the garrison of the Western Defense Zone was that it was only a mere 400 miles away from Shuanghu Island, the home of the Chen family. With Chen Daoxian's escaping speed, it only takes a few hundred breaths to rush back. Thus, when the family encounters any danger, he can take care of it immediately. If he really let him serve as the commander of other defense zones, Chen Daoxian would decisively refuse. Because in addition to his combat power comparable to Zifu, the strongest cultivator in the Chen family only has the 9th level of qi refining, and there is not even a foundation building cultivator. Once attacked by the zombies on Lotus Island, the Chen family would have no resistance at all. Seeing everyone regain their morale, Chen Daoxian continued, "We are the first group of monks to arrive, and it will take 3 months for the large army to arrive. During this period of time, let's work hard first, open up our respective caves first, and cultivate the spiritual veins here first. It should be the hard work of the leader. Opening up a cave is nothing more than a loose cultivator like me. Yes, yes, you are working hard, Commander. There is an adult in command of Lao. When they heard that Chen Daoxian was going to arrange a great formation for them, everyone was excited. Cultivating the third-order spiritual meridian requires not only 10 million spirit stones, but also a third-order spiritual formation. Generally speaking, you need to use a third-order array mage. However, with Chen Daoxian's formation skills and the ability of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic to store understanding, it is not too difficult to set up this formation. Just takes a little time. Chen Daoxian estimated that it would take about a month or so to complete the arrangement of this third-order spiritual formation. It is estimated that it will be a year before the spiritual pulse is promoted to the third rank. This time, of course, Chen Daoxian would not wait like this. You must know that the people who came to Sequoia Island on this trip were not only the 100,000 chi-refining cultivators and the 1,000 foundation-building cultivators, but also the huge group of mortals behind them. Among these cultivators, some are family cultivators of a family, and some are loose cultivators. But no matter what kind of monk, there are a lot of mortals behind them. In addition to placing these monks, Chen Daoxian also had to place these mortals. He estimated that the number of mortals behind this group of monks was at least tens of millions. This is a huge project, but also helpless. Now Guang'an Prefecture is constantly facing the threat of the corpse tide on Lotus Island. Ordinary chi refining families and scattered cultivators simply do not dare to be scattered on various islands in Guang'an Prefecture as they used to. The fate of doing so can be known by looking at the Zhao family. There is no cultivator who feels that his family or his own strength is stronger than the Zhao family. Warming in a group is a wise choice. This is also the reason why everyone at that time would try their best to object when they heard that Chen Daoxian was the commander of the Western Defense Zone. What they need is the protection of the strong, not a monk who is the same as theirs, or even inferior to them. Foreseeable. As Sequoia Island was developed, the Western Division was stationed there. More and more monks and mortals will gather towards Sequoia Island, especially the monks and mortals who usually live in the west of Guang'an Prefecture. As for going to the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, and the immortal city of Lingrui to settle down, there has to be a place there. Right now there is a corpse massacre in Guang'an House, and everyone is breaking their heads and trying to find a safe place to shelter. The first choice is definitely Lingbei Island of the Zhou family, but the total population of Guang'an Prefecture is more than hundreds of millions. With so many people, Lingbei Island can't bear it at all. The load here is not enough, which means that the land is not enough to live in. In fact, with the land of Zhoujiao Lingbei Island and the surrounding spiritual veins, there are hundreds of millions of people living there, and there is no problem at all. The burden here means that it cannot support so many mortals. After all, mortals are different from monks. Monks can eat qi and not die, they can refine spiritual energy, and they don't eat or drink. But mortals can't do it. If they don't eat or drink, mortals will starve to death. Hundreds of millions of mortals consume an astronomical amount of food every day. Large enough fields must be cultivated to feed these mortals. Therefore, it is impossible for the Zhou family to gather all mortals on several islands, which is unrealistic. Even Sequoia Island developed it. It is impossible for Chen Daoxian to arrange the population of more than 10 million on Sequoia Island. He will only use Sequoia Island as the core, while developing the surrounding islands as a food production place for mortals. Only in this way, to feed a huge population. For the time being, the situation is stable enough, and food can still be imported. But when the corpse chaos breaks out completely in the future, or Shinjua Junren comes up with some new actions, the entire Guang'an Prefecture will be in chaos. That a stable food base is very important. Only when the grain bag is firmly grasped can it be possible to develop. Otherwise, the mortals will starve to death, and the cultivation forces will not be far from decline. Of course, Chen Daoxian understood this simple truth. Sequoia Island, an easy port. Several Chen family cargo ships stopped here. Cargo ship. A gray-haired old man stepped off the cargo ship on crutches. Chen Lao, please slow down. Chen Daoxian looked at Chen Beiwang, who was faltering, took a few steps forward and supported him. Thank you, young patriarch. Chen Beiwang cupped his hands towards Chen Daoxian, then raised his head and looked at the fiery red Sequoia Island in front of him. Young patriarch, you are talking about this island? Right. Chen Daoxian nodded, thought about it and said, "Old Chen, let me show you the whole picture of Sequoia Island." Saying that, he waved his sleeves lightly. A gentle wind wrapped the two figures. Chen Beiwang and Chen Daoxian slowly ascended into the sky. When Chen Beiwang was on Shuanghu Island, he was led by the monks to survey the landforms. So very calm. Just over an hour. Chen Daoxian took Chen Beiwang to make a rough survey of the entire Sequoia Island. See the whole picture of Sequoia Island. Chen Beiwang cupped his hands and said, "Young patriarch, most of this island is a plain area. There are many trees, freshwater lakes and rivers on the island. It is very suitable for building a city along the coast. Compared with Shuanghu Island, the location here is better." Of course Chen Daoxian understood this. When Chen Jiazu chose to open a family on Shuanghu Island, it was entirely because of the spiritual eyes and copper mines on Qitong Mountain. Otherwise, choosing Sequoia Island is obviously much better than choosing Shuanghu Island. Hearing what Chen Beiwang said, Chen Daoxian nodded reassuringly and said, "Is there any problem if I entrust this city to you to build?" Hear this. Chen Beiwang was overjoyed at first, then shook his head gloomily and said bitterly, "It will take at least 10 years or even decades to build a city with the power of mortals. The old man can't wait that long. I am afraid that the young patriarch will be disappointed." Chen Beiwang bowed his hands. "Chen Lao, don't be pessimistic, your body is still strong." After a word of relief, Chen Daoxian continued, "I know that it took a long time to build this city with mortals as the main force. What if it was built with the power of monks?" "You mean?" Chen Beiwang moved in his heart and said a little excitedly, "Yes, I want you to lead the construction of this city, Mr. Chen. As for the specific construction tasks, it will be left to the monks to complete." But Chen Beiwang didn't know how to describe it. After a long while he said slowly, "But the old man is only a mortal. How can he command the immortal master to do things?" Chen Daoxian raised his hand and stopped. "It's settled like this, Chen Lao can rest assured. I guarantee that they will be very obedient." This. Chen Beiwang immediately thought of Chen Liangyu, the director of the family Feijian factory. In theory, the monks who work in the factory are also under the jurisdiction of Chen Liangyu. But, after all, he was a monk of his own clan, a disciple of his own clan. They accepted Chen Liangyi's management. Although Chen Beiwang was surprised, it was not unacceptable. And now he had to command strange monks to complete the work of building the city. This is completely different from Chen Beiwang's management of family monks. A monk, would he really follow a mortal's command? Chen Beiwang was very suspicious. But seeing Chen Daoxian's eyes, Chen Beiwang put away all the doubts in his heart. After all, in Chen Beiwang's eyes, there is nothing that Chen Daoxian cannot do. The Chen family is on Shuanghu Island and has grown step by step at a speed visible to the naked eye. Today's Chen family has become the most powerful family within a radius of 10,000 miles. Although this strongest has a lot of water, most of it is based on Chen Daoxian's personal strength. But with this momentum, the strength of the Chen family will soon catch up. The largest group of monks in the Fuzi generation is now 6 years old. In 2 years, they will continue to enter the factory with energy. At that time, the Chen family will really take off. At that time, what the Chen family needs to worry about is not the problem of insufficient production capacity, but the problem of insufficient market. Chen Daoxian knows that once the scale of industrialization expands, the increase in productivity will be explosive. Chapter 162. Sequoia Island. In a newly built palace. This is the temporary headquarters of the Western Defense Zone. What? Let's help mortals build cities? A base building cultivator wearing a blue robe suddenly stood up, his face full of disbelief. "See you." All the generals in the West Defense area looked at him. "Master Commander, I'll be blunt here. We are here to guard against the corpse tide on Lotus Island, not to build a city for mortals." The cultivator in the cyan robe was filled with righteous indignation, as if he had caused great humiliation to mortals by casting the city. Seeing this scene, the other monks also showed an indifferent attitude. A monk is a monk and a mortal is a mortal. In this world, there is only a reason for mortals to kowtow and bow for monks, and there is no reason for monks to carry bricks for mortals to build a city. Since the human race became the overlord of this world by relying on the power of monks, Monks have always been high above. Kills and punishes ordinary mortals at will. In Wuxia, this phenomenon is slightly better. Because of the decree of Qianyuan Jianzong, mortals were protected at the most basic level. Wanting to kill mortals is against the decree of Qianyuan Jianzong, even if this mortal is a slave. But Chen Daoxian asked the monks to build houses and cities for mortals, which was somewhat unacceptable to the cultivators. This is like asking a superior leader to go to the front line of the construction site to move bricks. Even the arrogance of their own ruling class made the monks feel particularly uncomfortable. It is also due to Chen Daoxian who gave them this order, their direct superior, and the sword cultivator who made the monks of the same level look up. If other monks of the same level dared to say this to him, maybe he would have to use a sword to reason with each other. Heard the words. Chen Daoxian glanced at the cultivators in the palace. He found that even Zhou Muqing and Zhou Xiliang were frowning at the moment, as if Chen Daoxian's behavior really challenged everyone's bottom line. But Chen Daoxian was unwilling and impossible to make concessions to the cultivators at this moment. He said coldly, "If I remember correctly, are you a monk of the Wei family?" "Your Majesty, Commander. The subordinates are members of the Wei family." The middle-aged cultivator in the blue Taoist robe cupped his hands and said respectfully. For Chen Daoxian, he was still convinced from the bottom of his heart. After all, a few days ago, Chen Daoxian defeated Lei Zhan, a famous loose cultivator with one sword in public, which was shocking. You must know that Lei Zhan's reputation among loose cultivators is not only due to his eagerness for justice, but also to his top-notch strength among foundation-building cultivators. Even so, he was still defeated by Chen Daoxian, a monk at the early stage of foundation building. And Wei Lidao asked himself, with his cultivation in the middle stage of foundation building, he is definitely not the opponent of Lei Zhan in the later stage of foundation building. One can imagine how big the difference in strength between him and Chen Daoxian is. The reason why the cultivators regard their status as high or low is essentially because of the difference in strength. Because normally, the strength of high-level monks will show a state of crushing against low-level monks. But not including the arrogant evildoers like Chen Daoxian and Zhou Mubai. This kind of genius, the combat power is often difficult to estimate with the cultivation base. For them, fighting beyond the ranks is as easy as a routine. For this arrogance, Wei Lidao naturally did not dare to offend in the slightest. If it wasn't for Chen Daoxian's request that was really contrary to common sense, Wei Lidao would not stand up and raise objections. After all, this is the first official order issued by the commander after he came to the station. Very good. Chen Daoxian nodded. Let me ask you, do your Wei family choose to stay in their original clan land? Or migrate to Sequoia Island? Heard the words. Wei Lidao frowned and cupped his hands. Naturally, he migrated here with his subordinates. How many tribes do you have? Master Commander, my Wei family has more than 300,000 members. More than 300,000 people. Tell me, where did they live on Sequoia Island? Wei Lidao was dumbfounded for a while. Indeed, where so many people have migrated here is a very serious question. Because mortals and monks are different. The monk wanted to build a palace cave, waved his hand, and it would be completed in a day or two. Besides, with the ability of monks to adapt to the environment, even if they eat and drink dew, it is a matter of life for them. But not ordinary people. They have no house, no food, they will freeze to death and starve to death. Compared with monks, mortals are much more vulnerable. Moreover, the Wei family members are only a part of the mortals who have migrated here, and there will be more mortals under the family and loose cultivators who will continue to migrate. No way. In order to deal with the corpse tide, in order to deal with Shinjua real people, everyone had to gather together to warm up. Otherwise, if a single family or a loose cultivator encounters the invasion of the Zifu zombies, it is not much different from being sent to death. The Zhao family was so powerful that the whole family was killed in the corpse, not to mention other families. Wei Liguo was speechless. Chen Daoxian continued. The first batch of mortals will arrive here in a month or more at most. Before that, if we don't build the first batch of houses, they will freeze to death. Chen Daoxian looked around at everyone, held up his hands and said, "Why do you want to see your own people or mortals under your command freeze to death?" Under Chen Daoxian's gaze, everyone lowered their heads. "See you." Chen Daoxian gave Zhou Muqing a look. After realizing it, Zhou Muqing immediately stood up and said, I am willing to build a city for mortals. Everyone looked at each other when they heard this. So they cupped their hands and said, I'm also willing to wait. Very good. Chen Daoxian smiled and said, It's not just that you are willing, you 10 are the commanders of the 10,000 soldiers in my western defense area. And you must also let the soldiers under your command understand this meaning, and help mortals build a city together. Now as in the midst of the disaster of Guang'an Mansion, whether it is monks or mortals, they must join hands to overcome the difficulties together. Here, don't let me hear about monks oppressing mortals. Otherwise, this seat recognizes him, and the sword in this seat may not recognize him. At the end, Chen Daoxuan's tone revealed Sun Lung's killing intent. This moment, everyone understands that the leader in front of him is not only a foundation-building cultivator in his 20s, but also a genius sword cultivator who holds 100,000 military power. The monks who have been on the front line know that just relying on Wei Li Dao to refute Chen Daoxuan's order just now is enough to be executed on the front line of Izumo. The charge is of course disobeying the military order. The current Guang'an prefecture is no different from the front line of the Izumo kingdom, and it has also been designated as a war zone by Qinyuan Jianzong. Since it is a war zone, the laws of the front line are naturally enforced. Wei Li Dao also reacted at this moment. He actually went around the gate of just now, and he couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat. Seeing everyone was silent, Chen Daoxian nodded with satisfaction and continued. The second thing is about the supply of magic weapons in the Western Defense Zone. Do you have any good channels to buy magic tools? Everyone is not stupid. When they heard this, they immediately knew that the opportunity to flatter the boss had come. Lei Zhan stood up first, his voice was like thunder, and the bombed hall roared. Master Commander, our magic weapon is mainly for those soldiers in the Qi refining period who do not have magic tools. Therefore, I think that the first-order low-grade and first-grade middle-grade magic tools are enough. The first-order high-grade magic tools are good, but the price is too high, and only a small amount of elite Qi refining cultivators can be equipped. And in Guang'an Prefecture, the best low-level magic tools are naturally Chen's family on Shuanghu Island, which is well known. When everyone heard the words, they nodded in agreement. Seeing that his subordinates are so sensible, Chen Daoxian was very satisfied, and he finally felt a bit like being a commander. Since you all think that my Chen family's low-level magic weapons are the best, then this military supply list will be handed over to my Chen family. Chen Daoxian immediately made a decision. Because the amount of military supplies is large, I have to pay part of the deposit to my Chen family. Otherwise I am afraid that my Chen family will go bankrupt. Ha 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 ha. It should be. As it should be. All the cultivators agreed with the Tao. The first batch of military supplies, I am going to buy 50,000 flying swords, including 30,000 first-order low-grade flying swords and 20,000 first-order mid-grade flying swords. According to the market price, this batch of flying swords will cost 3.5 million. Spirit Stone. First, pay half of the deposit of the Chen family, which is 1.75 million Spirit Stones, and the follow-up Spirit Stones will be settled within 3 years. The Chen family also needs to deliver this batch of flying swords within 3 years. Heard this. Everyone felt that there was no big problem. The only question was why there were 50,000 flying swords instead of 100,000. Heard this question. Chen Daoxian explained. Buying too much at one time, I'm afraid my Chen family can't eat it. Take your time. Everyone nodded. At this time, as long as you are not stupid, you all know that magical instruments and some special medicine pills and magic talismans will become resources in short supply. In war, what we fight is logistics. The same is true for wars between monks. It's just that compared with the ancient wars of the previous life, the war between monks, in addition to these logistical resources, also depends on the gap in the strength of the monks on both sides. For example, a cultivator in the Qi refining stage, even if he holds the best magic weapon, he can't be the opponent of the Zifu cultivator, even if the Zifu cultivator doesn't use any magic weapon or use any foreign objects. The gap in cultivation base is large to a certain extent, and foreign objects are almost irreparable. This is the biggest difference between monks and mortal warfare. Compared to the mortal war that relies only on equipment, the monk war, in the final analysis, depends on the strength of the warring parties. Take over this large order for military supplies. The Chen family did nothing and immediately got 1.75 75 million spirit stones. This is only the first business. In the future, the 80 million spirit stones will basically fall into the Chan family's pockets, in addition to the consumption of building spirit veins. If this is not possible, Chen Daoxian has been in vain all these years. Besides, these spiritual veins that have been built will eventually be disposed of by the Chan family. This is no different from the spiritual veins of the Chan family. As long as he has been the commander of this Western Defense Zone, is there anyone else who can rob him of the right to dispose of these spiritual veins? As for the position of commander of the Western Defense District, even if Chen Daoxian resigns in the future, only the cultivator of the Chan family can hold it. Because the area west of Guang'an Prefecture is already the Chan family's sphere of influence. This point, when the Zhou family divided the defense area a few days ago, it was determined. Chapter 163. Shuanghu Island. A spirit void battleship broke through the air and slowly landed towards the location of the Chan family spirit vessel. Followed. One after another figure flew down from the spirit void battleship. Chen family cultivator heard this movement, put down all the things in his hands, and rushed out to watch the fun. These days have passed. Chen family cultivator already knew that his young patriarch had become the commander of the West Defense Area of Guang'an Mansion, and he was in charge of 100,000 cultivators and soldiers. Although the Chen family has prospered in recent years, the family has grown stronger. But suddenly becoming a big family in Guang'an Prefecture, the Chen family cultivator is undoubtedly a little hard to accept, especially Chen Daochu and Chen Daolian. It seems that some time ago, they were still worried about the cultivation resources of the monks in the family after being promoted to the second-order spiritual vein. It's only been a few months. Chen Daoxian not only brought the Chen family to a new height, but also solved their urgent need for spiritual stones. Wow! Looking at the chests full of spiritual stones in front of him, Chen Daochu exclaimed. Chen Xianhe was also a little uneasy when he saw this scene. His nephew clearly only represented the Chen family in the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces, so why did he get a position as the commander of the Western Defense District and come back? Although Chen Daoxian had explained to him the powerful relationship a few days ago, but after seeing the treasure chest of spiritual stones piled up in front of me, I still couldn't help feeling a little bit. The Chen family has worked hard for so many years. The monks in the tribe produce flying swords day and night, only to save over 1 million spiritual stones. Now the Chen family is not doing anything, and looking at the spiritual stones in front of them, I am afraid that they will all exceed the inventory in the clan library. Thinking of this, Chen Xianhe couldn't help but ask, Daoxian, how many are there? Hearing this, Chen Daoxian made a gesture and said, a total of 175 million spirit stones. This is just a deposit, and 175 spirit stones will be delivered to my Chen family in the future. 1,750,000 spirit stones. It's just a prepaid deposit. Chen Xianhe only felt a little dizzy at the moment. This speed of making money is somewhat unacceptable to him. Chen Daoxian can't feel much change now, because there are nearly 80 million spirit stones waiting for him to deal with at the headquarters of the Western Defense District. Even after deducting more than 1,100,000 spiritual stones for cultivating third-order spiritual veins, there are more than 60 million spiritual stones left. Such a huge amount of wealth is enough for Chen Daoxian to slowly implement the plan that he had not dared to implement before. In addition to this spiritual stone, a large number of people migrated to Sequoia Island next. This is different from the female slaves he bought from the Izumo Kingdom in Guang'an Prefecture. These large numbers of mortals can provide the Chen family with a large number of women who marry Chen's men. And the women of the Chen family's own family can also marry into the affiliated family attached to the Chen family in the future. And so, decades later, these mortals will be slowly assimilated by the Chen family and become the help of the Chen family. Because compared to other clans, the Chen family will always encourage clansmen to have children. With enough women, coupled with the Chen family's policy of encouraging childbirth, the Chen family will surely develop into a veritable family in Guang'an Prefecture. Unlike now, the big family that only relies on Chen Daoxuan's genius sword to cultivate his name and support it. Master Commander, I'll retire for the time being. After carrying the spirit stone, Lei Zhan stepped forward and cupped his hands. Chen Daoxian waved his hand and said, Brothers who have worked hard. This is a little meaning for brothers. Having said that, Chan Daoxian threw a storage bag over, which contained 5,000 whole spirit stones. Thank you for the reward, Lord Commander. Lei Zhan took the storage bag and said with joy. Chan Daoxian nodded and watched the Lingshu battleship under his command leave. It's really convenient. If my Chen family can use this kind of spirit boat to transport goods in the future, that's the taste. Chan Xianhe looked at the Lingshu battleship with envy in his eyes. Chan Daoxian shook his head. The Lingshu battleship is not very suitable for transporting materials. The one that is really suitable for transporting materials should be the frontline transport ship of Qianyuan Jianzong. Okay. Chan Xianhe glared. I'll just say you're still panting. The large transport ship that transports materials to the front lines of Wanxinghai and Izumo is a kind of strategic transport spirit boat, refined by Qianyuan Jianzong with great energy. It can not only carry dead things, but also transport living things. It is said that the interior is a miniature cave, but I don't know what it is. Seeing Chan Xianhe like this, Chan Daoxian laughed. He still remembered that when he said that he would train a large number of refiners for the Chen family, Chan Xianhe also said that the Zhou family did not dare to think about it. Now it seems. In 2 years, the Chen family will further expand the Feijian factory. Even is not just a Feijian factory. Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone. In a new factory building. Chen Daochu and Chan Daolian looked at the strange-looking magic weapon in Chan Daoxuan's hands, and they were a little confused. Young Patriarch, what is this for? Chan Daochu pointed to the cylindrical magic weapon in Chan Daoxuan's hand, and said curiously. This instrument, I call it a centrifugal wall breaker, also known as a centrifugal wall breaker. You will know its specific use later. Chan Daoxian smiled mysteriously. Finished. Chan Daoxian took out 3 kinds of elixir from the storage bag, namely, Huanlinko, Weeping Blood Flower and Huichi Root. These 3 kinds of elixir are all first-order low-grade elixir, and the total value is about 30 spirit stones. Chan Daolian recognized at a glance that these were the 3 types of elixir for refining the first-order low-grade elixir, and the chi-returning elixir. Seeing the curiosity in Chan Daolian's eyes, Chan Daoxian smiled and said, It's good, finished. He put 3 elixir into 3 different cylindrical centrifugal wall breakers. Next second, he pressed a button on the centrifugal wall breaker. I saw the centrifugal wall breaker spinning at high speed. Chan Daolian and Chan Daochu were dumbfounded, not knowing what medicine Chan Daoxian sold in the gourd. But it used to be less than half a cup of tea. Chan Daolian's face suddenly became serious. How can it be? She looked at Chan Daoxian with a look of shock on her pretty face. Chan Daochu didn't know about alchemy, so he couldn't see why he came. At this moment, he said with an uncomfortable expression, What's the matter? This thing separates the impurities in the elixir from the essence of the elixir. Chan Daolian pointed tremblingly at the machine in front of him, even more shocked than when he first saw the Rongling furnace. What's the use of this? Chan Daochu still looked puzzled. Forget it, you're not an alchemist, so it doesn't make sense to tell you. Chan Daolian's face was full of contempt. Chan Daochu turned his head away in frustration. Chan Daoxian ignored the bickering between the two, and did the same, pressing all the buttons of the 3 centrifugal wall breakers. Soon, 3 kinds of elixir, under the action of 3 centrifugal wall breakers, all separate elixir impurities and elixir essence. Immediately afterwards, Chan Daoxian said, I'll turn the valve open later, and the essence of the elixir will flow down. You have to combine these 3 kinds of elixir essences into a pill as soon as possible, you know? Chan Daolian nodded. So long has passed. She has long been a qualified first-order middle-grade alchemist, and is also an alchemy teacher at Chongping No. 1 Primary School. Refining Qi Hui pill, the most basic first-order low-grade spiritual pill, is of course not difficult for Chan Daolian. Seeing her like this, Chan Daoxian opened the valve immediately. Next second, 3 kinds of elixir essences flow down directly under the action of gravity. Chan Daolian didn't dare to neglect, and when she used the technique of combining and refining into a pill, she caught the essence of the 3 kinds of elixir that flowed down, and then slowly combined it into a pill. Takes less than half a cup of tea. The essences of the 3 kinds of elixir were combined by Chan Daolian into a chi-returning pill, which floated in front of the three of them. That's it. Chan Daochu on the side of was surprised and said, "You used the alchemy furnace to help control the fire. So as not to burn the elixir, why don't you use it now?" When Chan Daolian heard this, she immediately put on an expression that was too lazy to explain. Chan Daoxian did not have the idea of explaining the knowledge of alchemy to an alchemist who didn't understand anything. He turned to look at Chan Daolian and said, "How much do you think this kind of machine can help alchemists?" "This is simply an artifact of alchemy." Chan Daolian commented, "I used the alchemy furnace to make Huichi Dan before, and the success rate was about 60%. At the cost of refining a furnace of Huichi Dan 30 spirit stones, I can probably earn about 30 spirit stones. And now," she shook her head and sighed, "using this kind of machine to assist in refining the Qi Hui pill, it is absolutely impossible for me to fail, and at the most critical point it saves me too much time refining the impurities of the elixir. I used to refine a furnace of Huichi Dan before, which took about 3 hours. Now it only takes 1 stick of incense at most and I can make 10 Huichi Dan. On average it takes less than half a cup of tea. Half a cup of tea, that is 1 every 5 minutes. Even if it is only refined for 10 hours a day, there are 120 Qi Hui pills. The price of each Huichi pill is 10 spirit stones, and the income can reach 1,200 spirit stones. This is just 1 day's income for a low-grade alchemist. Throwing out the cost, the gross profit is about 840 spirit stones, which is comparable to that of a refiner in the Feifei sword factory refining 5 flying swords a day, earning a profit of 100 spirit stones. Is simply not on the same level. This is just the most basic first-order low-grade spirit pill to restore qi. If you replace it with an elixir that assists your practice, the profit will be even greater. For example, a first-order mid-grade spirit pill, qi gathering pill, costs 50 spirit stones for each. Even if the refining speed of this kind of elixir is a little slower, it can only refine 100 a day, and the income can reach 5,000 spiritual stones a day. Throwing out the cost, the gross profit in 1 day can reach a terrifying 4,000 spirit stones. And whether in Wuxia or in other cultivation worlds, the demand for medicinal pills is always the greatest, far greater than the demand for magical instruments, so there is no need to worry about market problems. A cultivator who buys a first-order magic weapon can use it for 10 years, but what about the elixir? If you eat it open, you should eat 1 a month and at least a dozen a year. This is just an elixir to assist cultivation. In times of war, elixir to restore true energy, elixir to restore injury, elixir to detoxify, etc., are all in demand. Is like the present Guang'an Prefecture. Auxiliary cultivation elixir and breakthrough elixir, which are always in demand, are excluded. There is a huge demand for the 3 kinds of medicinal pills, Huichi Dan, Jedu Dan, and Posha Dan, especially in the eastern sector on the front line. Chen Daoxian can now imagine that Zhou Mubai must be quite troubled by Posha pill and Jedu pill. Because of these 2 medicinal herbs, they are a must for dealing with zombies. Without them, the cultivator would have to raise the danger of zombies by more than 2 levels. Chen Daoxian felt the power of Posha Dan, and the effect was too good. Of course, he was taking the second-order high-grade Posha pill, which was naturally incomparable with the ordinary first-order Posha pill. But even so, when he and Zhou Mubai were able to kill each other from the corpse and blood evil formation of the other side, it was a great contribution to the breaking evil pill. If it wasn't for Posha pill that blocked most of the blood-shattering aura for them, he and Zhou Mubai would have been in a much more dangerous situation that day. Think of this. Chen Daoxian looked at Chen Daolian and said, "Now the children of Fuzi in the clan, how about the knowledge of alchemy?" Heard this. Chen Daolian hesitated slightly. "Young patriarch, they are only 6 years old." Chen Daoxian was embarrassed by the revelation, and immediately resolutely said, "Isn't this catching up with the turmoil in Guang'an? I can't help it." He glanced at the brand new factory building, and said, "Daolian, after the results of this year's test come out, let's put the study places for the 50 best alchemy students in the Life of Blessings here. Can also be regarded as learning and production at the same time, without delay." When Chen Daochu heard this, he looked at Chen Daoxian with trembling eyes. "Is too cruel." When their batch of Taoist monks entered the factory at the age of 8, he already felt that Chen Daoxian was cruel enough. Now I think that the family life is good, and the cultivation environment for the children of Fuzi will be better. As a result, the time to enter the factory is earlier, and it was changed to 6 years old. Chan Daoxuan's actions, even if the capitalists in the previous life saw it, I'm afraid they would be convinced. This has to be put in a previous life. Even if he was shot 10 times, it would not be enough for the common people to be angry. But Chen Daoxian had no choice. He really wants to develop slowly, but the general environment does not give him the opportunity to develop slowly. Now he can't wait to use the catalyst to make those immortal seedlings who have not grown up to grow up directly. The Chun family is too short of manpower. And industrial production can't do anything without people. At least before entering into intelligence, a large population is an indispensable factor for industrialization. As for letting outsiders enter the Chun family's factory, to be honest, Chen Daoxian is not at ease. In other words, he is not strong enough to resist this risk. If he is the true monarch Yuanying at this moment, then Chen Daoxian would dare to use loose cultivators or other family members to work for the Chun family factory. But now he absolutely dare not. Since it's going to be officially put into production here, why don't we give it a name? Chen Daochu suggested. Name. Chen Daolian lowered her head in thought. Let's call it Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. Chen Daoxian thought about it and said, Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. The two thought about it, and then nodded in agreement. The name is quite satisfactory, and there is nothing to argue against. After naming his name, Chen Daoxian looked at Chen Daochu and said, Do you know why I came to you? Do not know. Chen Daochu shook his head, having a bad feeling in his heart. In this year I plan to expand the Hongyin Feijian factory, as well as the Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. For these two factories, one needs a melting furnace and the other needs a centrifugal wall breaker. These two special instruments all require you to refine them. What? Chen Daochu was dumbfounded when he heard this. Chapter 164. Looking at Chen Daochu's resentful eyes, Chen Daoxian smiled and said, Don't look at me like that. I have to arrange a great formation for the family in Sequoia Island, especially Sequoia Island. Next, our family will build a fairy city there. Build a fairy city? Chen Daochu and Chen Daolian were attracted by his words. Is it a fairy city like the fairy city of Guang'an Prefecture? The eyes of the two lit up and said, Of course it's not as good as the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion now, but in the future, it's hard to say. Chen Daoxian said a lot. The demarcation of the West Defense Zone means that the large area west of Guang'an House will be the Chun family's sphere of influence in the future. You must know that the family that thrives in this area is far more than the Chun family. Actually, even if the area to the west of Guang'an Prefecture is vast and sparsely populated, it really has a population of tens of millions. With such a population, there are at least hundreds of thousands of monks. It does not include people who will rush here from other regions in the future. The reason is simple. Don't look at the weakest strength of the West Defense Zone, but at the same time it is also the rear of Guang'an Prefecture, and the East Defense Zone, Northern Zone, and Lingbei Island are in the front line. For those loose cultivators who have no intention to go to the front line, or who dare not go to the front line, the Southern Defense Area and the Western Defense Area are their best choices. Especially the West Defense Zone, because the Southern District is also the Zhou family in command. In the future, if Lingbei Island is corrupted by war, it must also support Lingbei Island and be involved in the war. Only the West Defense Zone seems to be the safest at present. Apart from preventing the corpse from sneaking around the bottom of the Wuxia Sea, there is almost no danger. This situation, as long as the mind is a little clearer, it is not difficult to analyze it. Heard that the family is going to build a fairy city on Sequoia Island. Chen Daochu and Chen Daolian were immediately excited. The body, which was a little tired, was full of motivation again. There is an unparalleled sense of achievement and pride in watching the family grow and grow in their hands. Including Chen Daoxian, I also feel this way now. True. With Chen Daoxuan's talent, he might abandon his family and become a loose cultivator on the front line of Izumo. He can go more smoothly and easily, but at the same time he can never reap that sense of pride and satisfaction. What is the practice of doing? Just for longevity? If it's just for the sake of longevity like the Sun brothers, they become inhuman zombies to some extent, isn't it also a kind of longevity? Obviously not. In Chen Daoxuan's view, the ultimate purpose of cultivation is to allow oneself to live freely. In the human world it is too difficult, to achieve the word happy and happy. Even more difficult than longevity and immortality. By the way, how is the infuriating temper of the two of you now? As if remembering something, Chen Daoxian asked suddenly. Hear this question. Chen Daoqi's face was full of confidence, and he said, my true qi will be polished in a year at most. So fast. Chen Daoxian raised his brows. The speed of polishing his true qi was not only not slower than him, but even 1 point faster. Of course, grinding infuriating energy has nothing to do with spiritual roots. It's all about one's physique. Obviously, with Chen Daoqi's physique, it is easier to perfect his infuriating energy. Chen Daolian saw Chen Daoqi's smug look on her face, and her pretty face was a little puffed up, and said, you young patriarch, my true qi has only been polished to 1/3. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian nodded. This speed is not too slow. You can build a foundation within 2 years at most. Hear the progress of their practice. Chen Daoxian couldn't help feeling emotional. Chen Daoqiu and Chen Daolian are the same age, and they are less than 15 years old this year. Chen Daoqiu will build the foundation next year, and he will only be 16 years old, while Chen Daolian will be a little older, about 17 years old. In other words, both of them broke Zhou Mubai's record for foundation building. Of course, from Chen Daoxian's point of view, although the two of them broke Zhou Mubai's record of foundation building, their true talents were still far from Zhou Mubai's. The reason why Chen Daoqiu and Chen Daolian practiced faster than Tianling and Cultivator was entirely due to the unlimited investment of the Chen family's cultivation resources. This kind of investment is completely irrational in the eyes of the great cultivation forces. But the Chen family didn't care. Chen Daolian and Chen Daoqiu are one of the few cultivators in the Taoist generation. In the short term, Chen Daoxian also expects the two of them to share the heavy responsibilities for him. With their qi refining stage, they definitely couldn't share the heavy responsibilities for him, but after the foundation was established they could do more things. At least in the future, it will be more pompous to go out to communicate with other families on behalf of the Chen family. It doesn't matter that the Chen family really relies on Chen Daoxian to support the facade. This kind of big family can't help but make people laugh. Encourage Chen Daoqiu and Chen Daolian. Chen Daoxian left the Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone. Start to set up the second-order Yunling Formation on Shuanghu Island. From the name of this formation, it can be seen that this is a second-order formation, and no one in the entire Chen family can arrange it except Chen Daoxian. Compared with the first-order Yunling Great Array, the second-order Yunling formation is much more complicated. Even with Chen Daoxian's formation skills, it took 10 days to complete the formation. Chen Daoxian, who has cultivated first-order spiritual veins, knows this in his heart. The next days, it is to look at the power of creation in the spiritual stone, slowly transform the spiritual veins, and promote the first-order spiritual veins of the Chen family to the second order. This time about half a year or so. Until then, the Chen family will have a second-order spiritual vein, which can not only be used by the clan to build foundations, but also provide enough spiritual energy for cultivation for the ever-increasing number of cultivators. After arranging the spiritual veins of Shuanghu Island, Chen Daoxian did the same and began to arrange the spiritual veins of Sequoia Island. Delayed for so many days, seeing that the commander has finally started to cultivate third-order spiritual veins for them, everyone was in high spirits. Sequoia Island is a deserted island, which means that it is difficult for everyone to cultivate for such a long time. Change to normal times. In this difficult environment, the cultivators have long since erupted. But the cultivators also knew that at this time, Guang'an Prefecture was in turmoil, and the front line was always facing the threat of the corpse tide on Lotus Island. It would be nice if they could have a safe place to stay. Otherwise, they can return to their respective clans. But after seeing the Zhao family end, who would dare to stay alone on their original island? Master Commander! See Chen Daoxian's escape. A senior 10,000 soldiers in the middle stage of foundation building stopped cutting trees with a flying sword and bowed to Chen Daoxian. Chen Daoxian glanced around the busy construction site and said, "Where's Mr. Chen?" Chen will be in front. Following the direction of the 10,000 pawns' long fingers, Chen Daoxian saw that Chen Beiwang was hunched over, lying in front of a huge picture, describing something to Zhongxiu. Although the cultivators are not as proficient in architecture as Chan Beiwang, a man who has built houses all his life, since they usually open caves by themselves, they are not completely ignorant of architecture. Under the guidance of Chan Beiwang, the cultivators quickly understood what Chen Beiwang meant. Lei Zhen cupped his hands and said, "Old Chen's meaning, I'll wait to understand. You can rest assured it's just that we have more people building houses. I am afraid that the number of monks who chop down trees and carry and cut stone is not enough." Obviously, Chan Beiwang didn't understand the construction speed of the monks, so he distributed all kinds of workers according to the proportion of ordinary people. Hearing Lei Zhen's words at this moment, he couldn't help being stunned. Then, according to the advice of the immortal master, how should the manpower be allocated? Chan Beiwang said respectfully, "I think 70% of people deal with building materials, and 30% of people build houses and pave roads. This ratio is more appropriate." "Okay. Just follow what the immortal master said." Chan Beiwang nodded. "Old Chan." Just as he was talking, Chan Daoxian walked over from behind Chan Beiwang. "Master Commander! Master Commander!" Seeing Chan Daoxian, everyone bowed their hands to him. Chan Daoxian responded one by one, then looked at Chan Beiwang and said in surprise, "Did you get the design of the city so quickly?" "Heard." Chan Beiwang stroked his beard proudly and said, "For so many years, the old man has built bridges and roads for my Chan family, built houses and expanded the county seat of Chongping County. It's not that the people under his command have made no progress at all." Hear this explanation. Chan Daoxian nodded clearly. Indeed, it is not only the cultivators of the Chan family who have made progress. The progress of mortals is actually greater than that of cultivators. It's just that Chan Daoxian's eyes have been on the monks, ignoring the progress of the ordinary people of the Chan family. Take a few steps forward. Chan Daoxian picked up the extremely complicated city plans on the table. After looking at them carefully, he raised his head and said, "Old Chan, don't you have room for the inner city?" "Inner city?" Chan Beiwang glanced at Chan Daoxian in confusion, not knowing what he meant by the inner city. But the expressions of all the foundation establishment cultivators present changed. How they do not understand the meaning of inner city. The so-called inner city is the immortal city built within the mortal city, such as Guang'an Prefecture Immortal City, Lingrui Immortal City and so on. Obviously, Chen Daoxian also wants to build a fairy city on Sequoia Island. And it seems that the spiritual stones possessed by the West Defense Zone are indeed enough to build such a fairy city. Only, Master Commander, Lei Zhen thought about it for a while, and said cautiously, "Our military expenses, but part of it is the military salaries of the soldiers." "I know." Chen Daoxian glanced at him and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I will distribute the military salaries of the soldiers in a lot of points, whether it is on the front line of Izumo, or in the current Guang'an Prefecture coalition. When monks join the army, they all have military pay. It's just that on the front line of Izumo, military pay is paid in the form of military merit. In Guang'an Prefecture, the coalition forces were distributed in the form of spirit stones. Although this military salary is not high, there are a total of 100,000 soldiers in the Western Defense Zone, which is a terrifying figure. As for embezzling army salaries, Chan Daoxian couldn't do it. In his opinion, even if the military salaries are distributed to the soldiers of the scattered cultivators, they will still have to spend them sooner or later. The left and right are back in the hands of the Chan family. Why is it so ugly to give people a handle? Chapter 165. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, half a year has passed. Sequoia Island, Guanhai Pavilion. The waves crashed on the stone bench of the Guanhai Pavilion, making a roaring sound. The upper half is a human body, and the lower half is a figure with a fishtail. The enchanting upper body was exposed from the sea, looking at the harbor where the ships were constantly at the end of the line of sight, and sighed. "I never imagined that in just 1 year, the changes here would be so great." Heard. Chen Daoxian followed Luo Li's line of sight. In the distant harbor, the white sails are connected together, and most of the major families bring their own clansmen to Sequoia Island. Here is the resident of the Western Defense Zone. In the eyes of the monks of Guang'an Mansion, it is one of the safest places. Only half a year. With the concerted efforts of a group of monks, the prototype of a city has been slowly built on Sequoia Island. With the arrival of mortals, the city has gradually gained popularity and has become increasingly prosperous. Luoli looked at the seaport city in the distance, turned her head and asked, "What's its name?" "Guanhai City." "Guanhai City," Luoli murmured, then looked at the ugly pavilion in front of her, and couldn't help but burst out laughing. "What's up?" Chen Daoxian looked at her strangely. "Nothing, just thought of something interesting." Luoli shook her head. "Then I'm leaving. It seems that I can't trade with you here in the future. Now there are more and more people here." Saying that, Luoli's eyes faintly revealed a hint of fear. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian smiled. "Why can't you trade with me here? I'm not afraid. What are you afraid of?" Seeing him like this, Luoli said angrily, "Aren't I afraid of causing you trouble?" "Trouble? What trouble?" Chen Daoxian said as usual, "The so-called trouble is just an excuse for lack of strength. Since all the big clans have affiliated races in the Wuxia underwater world, isn't it only natural for my Chen family to have an affiliated race?" But Luoli didn't know how to argue. Seeing that Luoli had misunderstood, Chen Daoxian smiled and said, "Who do you think built that city?" He pointed to Guanhai City in the distance. "Isn't it built by some big family in Guang'an Prefecture?" Luo Likio's face was full of surprise. "Yes, it was built by the big family in front of you." "Your Chen family?" Luoli looked at Chen Daoxian with an incredible look on her pretty face. The strength of the Chen family, although the Mer people are not clear, but they know that the Chen family is by no means a big family in Guang'an. In Guang'an Prefecture there are only 3 families of Yang, Wu, and Zhao who can be called a big family. Among them, the Chen family is not included. The Zhao family? Hearing Luoli mentioning the Zhao family, Chen Daoxian shook his head. "The Zhao family is gone." "No." "No?" Luoli was a little unresponsive. "What does it mean when it's gone?" Seeing her like this, Chen Daoxian told her what happened on Lotus Island. After hearing the news, Luo Likio's face was full of horror. "You mean, Gaju is not dead?" Luoli's voice trembled slightly, right? Chen Daoxian frowned. "Is the real person Shinjue so afraid of you?" Hearing this, Luoli took a deep breath, calmed down and said solemnly, "You don't understand. According to the records in our clan, the true person of Shinjue did not only disrupt the nearby states, but also our underwater world. At that time, Songzhou united the monks in Taizhou and Jingzhou to form a coalition army, but failed to strangle the real person of Shinjue. In the end, the Qianyuan sword sect sent 3 Yuanying Zhenjuan to suppress the chaos of Shinjue. A late Jindan cultivator. Is it so difficult to deal with?" Chen Daoxian frowned. "Tough. Very difficult." Luoli nodded. "The most difficult thing about Shinjue Jinren is not that he is far superior to the monks of the same level, but his ability to escape." "Oh, what's his ability to escape?" In the ancient books of the Zhou family, he also saw that Shinjue Jinren was extremely good at escaping, but the ancient books did not record his escape methods in detail. "You should know that Shinjue Jinren has obtained the inheritance of an immortal from the upper realm, right?" Chen Daoxian nodded. Almost everyone knew about this rumor. The reason why the loose cultivators are so interested in Shinjue Jinren is also because of his legendary experience. An ordinary loose cultivator, he was inherited by the immortals, and he has since then swept the world. To a certain extent, the experience of the real person Shinjue is simply a classic protagonist template in the novel. Of course, he still failed to defy the sky in the end, and was directly pressed to death by the 3 nascent soul true monarchs sent by the Qianyuan sword sect. However, the damage caused by the rebellion of God to Tsongzhou and the surrounding states was simply devastating. Luoli didn't know what Chen Daoxian was thinking, so he continued. In the legend, the immortal Shinjue obtained the inheritance of an immortal in a secret space opened up by an immortal. Dongtian. Right? Luoli nodded. The cave opened up by the immortals. She paused. In this Dongtian immortal mansion, immortal Shinjue has obtained several important inheritances and instruments, one of which is called Michin Fan, but in an instant he can escape hundreds of thousands of miles away. Outside. 100,000 miles? Chen Daoxian stared blankly at the other party, wondering if she was talking in her sleep. What is the concept of escaping 100,000 miles in an instant? Chen Daoxian is now flying with his sword with all his strength, and it will take nearly a day to reach it. Even if it is true monarch nascent soul, it would take nearly half an hour to cross a distance of 100,000 miles. In other words, even for true monarch nascent soul, it would be almost impossible to capture the true master Shenju holding the Michin banner. I just don't know how the 3 Yuanying Zhenjuan of Qinyuan Jianzong trapped Shenjua Zhenren. But think about it. It is nothing more than the use of formations or special instruments to block the space, so that Shenjua Zhenren can't escape. More than that, Michin Fan, the real person of Shenjua, is said to be able to set the space node for transmission in advance. You mean, he placed the teleportation node in Zion Fudongshan? Right. Lori nodded. It's too goofy. This time Chan Daoxian finally knew why Qinyuan Jianzong sent a secret hand to solve the real Shenjua. To some extent, as long as the real person Shenju does not actively expose the cave opened by the immortals, there is probably no one in this world who can discover the spatial location of this cave. Qinyuan Jianzong knew that Shenjua Zhenren was hiding in this cave, but there was no way to take him. Moreover, Shenjuezhen's character is also extremely cautious. He only sent a group of corpse servants out to make wind and rain, but he did not come out behind the scenes. It seemed that the somersault 400 years ago had completely improved his memory, and he also knew the truth of the heavens. But this is not good news for Qinyuan Jianzong. True, with the strength of Shenjua Zhenren, it is not a threat to Qinyuan Jianzong. But there is always such a character in your hinterland, and Qinyuan Jianzong must have a feeling of being stuck in his throat. Without even removing him, Qinyuan Jianzong would not be able to attack the country of Yunyun with all his strength, because the real person Shenjua may set fire to the backyard of Qinyuan Jianzong at any time. I watched Luoli leave. Chen Daoxian fell into deep thought. He is now finally certain that the war with the Lotus Island corpse servant is nothing at all. Whether it is Gaju Daoist or Qinyuan Jianzong, I am afraid that they will not care about the outcome of this war. For Qinyuan Jianzong, the most important thing is to find out the real person Shenjua. But what is the most important thing to the real God? Also, you have been hiding for so long. Why did you suddenly come out to engage in wind and rain? Could it be that you can't stand the loneliness? Too many puzzles lingered in Chan Daoxuan's heart, making him feel heavy. Although for Qinyuan Jianzong, the battle with the corpse tied on Lotus Island was not important, but for the Guang'an monks, this war was a war to defend their homeland. Absolutely cannot fail. Otherwise, the Guang'an cultivator would have to hide in another state capital like a lost dog. But in Wangxinghai, there are no other spiritual veins that can allow monks from Guang'an to settle in. Even if the big clan has enough spiritual stones, they can cultivate new spiritual veins. But without the foundation of Guang'an Mansion, even the Zhou family would inevitably decline. Because monks practice, in addition to spiritual veins, they also need various cultivation resources. These cultivation resources must be purchased with spirit stones. Without Guang'an Mansion, a place to make money, where did the Zhou family get enough spirit stones to meet the needs of the Zhou family's tens of millions of clansmen and hundreds of thousands of cultivators to cultivate? The same is true for the Chun family on Shuanghu Island. The Chun family finally got the recognition of Zhou, Yang and other big clans in Guang'an House, and the family development is booming. Seeing that the family is getting stronger and stronger, why is Chen Daoxian willing to leave his hometown like this? Therefore, for the monks in Guang'an, especially the family monks in Guang'an, this battle is a must. With a heavy heart, Chen Daoxian flashed and flew towards Shuanghu Island, Twin Lakes Island, Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. Step into the factory. Looking at the young figures in the factory building, Chen Daoxian only felt a little sore in his nose. As long as there is a way, Chen Daoxian will definitely not let such a small cultivator of the Chen family come to the pharmaceutical factory to refine the medicinal pills. Fuyuan, how did you do it? It's been half a year. Why haven't you been able to refine the detoxification pill in a perfect way? You can only make one pill together at a time. You can make mistakes? 16-year-old Chen Daolian saw that Chen Fuyuan failed to concoct pills. Her eyebrows stood upright, and she reprimanded. He seemed to be frightened by Chen Daolian's reprimand. The little girl named Chen Fuyuan, her petite body trembled slightly. Tears were faintly rolling in her eyes. Cough, cough. Chen Daoxian coughed lightly. Hearing this cough, Chen Daolian, who devoted himself to teaching everyone to make alchemy, came back to his senses, stood up quickly and bowed his head. Young patriarch. Chen Daoxian nodded and said with a smile, "How is it? Do you still get used to studying here?" Chen Daoxian knew what Chen Daoxian was most concerned about, and smiled sweetly. Compared with the ethnic studies class, there are so many more practical opportunities. In just half a year, these 50 disciples of the blessing character can almost all refine the first-order lower grades. Medicine pill. At this rate, at most 1 year, they will be able to refine the first-order middle-grade medicine pill. Okay. Hearing the good news, Chen Daoxian nodded with satisfaction. The cultivator of the Chen family finally did not disappoint him. Chapter 166. It is different from the peaceful West Defense Zone behind Guang'an House. In the East Zone, the war with the corpse tide on Lotus Island has been intensified since the very beginning. The coalition forces in the Eastern Defense Zone led by Zhou Mubai were attacked by the corpse tide on Lotus Island before they could cultivate the spiritual veins and build the city gate. Fortunately, Zhou Mubai and the 3 Zifu cultivators from the Zhou family turned the tide and stabilized the almost collapsed battle situation. Finally, the 4 islands near Lotus Island have laid a foundation. In half a year, 4 immortal cities were established, completely blocked the road from the entire Lotus Island to Guang'an Prefecture. Thus, if the corpse tide on Lotus Island wanted to spread to Guang'an Prefecture, they could only tear through the line of defense set up by Zhou Mubai. A full half a year, the 2 sides surrounded the 4 city gates, and several battles broke out. Small battles are even more difficult to count. After half a year of fighting, in particular, Zhou Mubai took the opportunity to break out and wiped out tens of thousands of enemy zombies in one move, causing the Sun Brothers on Lotus Island to change their strategy. They chose to reduce the scale of wars, turning large wars into small harassing raids. So far, the 2 sides have entered the stage of tug-of-war and war of attrition around the 4 city gates. Every day there are monks who fall in front of the city gate. Every moment, countless zombies were strangled by the coalition cultivators on the spot. However, compared to consumption, how can the monk be the opponent of the Lotus Island corpse servant? According to the statistics of the Allied forces in the Eastern Defense Zone, the corpse refining grounds on Lotus Island had at least tens of millions of zombies. Even if the strength of a single cultivator far exceeds that of ordinary zombies, it is still facing such a huge corpse tide. Especially under the invasion of Lianhua Island's evil spirit, it is almost impossible to counterattack Lianhua Island. You must know that the entire coalition army in the Eastern Defense Zone is only more than 900,000 soldiers. Among them, most of them are cultivators in the Qi refining period. Say it again. Zhou Mubai is also not sure how many Zifu-level zombies there are on Lotus Island. If it is as he guessed, the Purple Mansion zombies on Lotus Island can be refined in batches, then he rushed in, but he would not have the same luck as last time. The last time he and Chen Daoxian teamed up to get out of Lotus Island was based on the fact that the other party only had 5 zombies from the Purple House. Otherwise, 1 or 2 Zifu zombies last time will continue to be consumed. Once Zhou Mubai's mana is exhausted, both he and Chen Daoxian will be folded on Lotus Island. An island near Lotus Island, above the city gate. A monk in spirit armor strode towards Zhou Mubai. At this time Zhou Mubai was also wearing spirit armor, exuding a strong murderous aura. Master Commander! The Lingjia cultivator bowed to Zhou Mubai. The corpse tide at the 4th city gate has receded. Heard. Zhou Mubai nodded clearly, and relaxed his clenched hand slightly. In this city gate he guarded, not many zombies dared to come to trouble at ordinary times. But the city gates of the other 3 islands are almost always faced with the invasion of the corpse tide from Lotus Island. No way, who made the other Zifu cultivators in his Zhou family not have his deterrent power. If the zombies on Lotus Island are a group of mindless and sinister things, it would be better to say. But they have 2 conductors. Zhou Mubai felt extremely regretful every time he thought about it. It would have been nice if he had insisted on beheading the white-faced zombie that was fighting against him. Because he knows that now their coalition is facing such a big trouble, this guy is all behind the scenes. Even intercepted the Wu family's cargo ship from the beginning. It was a premeditated act to attract the attention of Guang'an Prefecture, and then take the opportunity to sneak up on the Zhao family and slaughter the entire Zhao family. As for taking the opportunity to remove the cultivator from the Zhou family's purple house who went to investigate, it was a matter of convenience. If it wasn't for him, Zhou Mubai and Chan Daoxian would go there. If the 3 Zifu monks from the Zhou family joined forces to investigate, the Zhou family is now about to lose 3 Zifu battle strength. Zhou Mubai had no doubts about this. The reason why Zhou Mubai felt that the group of Sun brothers removed the Zhao family was a premeditated act, because the coalition forces in the East Defense area were in urgent need of supplies, especially the 2 medicines Jedu pill and Posha pill. If the Zhao family is still there, they will definitely be able to provide medicinal herb resources for the coalition forces. But unfortunately, the Zhao family is gone. Although the Zhou family is also a big alchemy family, but with the strength of the Zhou family alone, it is impossible to supply the medicinal pill consumption of the coalition forces in the East Defense Zone. And there is no detoxification pill and Posha pill. When facing zombies, the chi refining cultivator of the coalition army will be more than 2 levels more dangerous. Many monks died not under the fangs of zombies, but in the follow-up corpse poison. This made Zhou Mubai extremely annoyed. But nothing can be done. Although his strength is strong, under the outbreak, killing tens of thousands of zombies with 1 blow is basically his limit. And the other party has to give them a chance. Since the other party found out that Zhou Mubai was so fierce, there has been almost no large-scale invasion, all of which are small-scale and large-scale harassment. No matter how strong Zhou Mubai is, how can he take into account the 4 islands in so many battlefields? Tong! Master Commander, Wu Guangyi, who was wearing a spirit armor, hesitated a little. The medicinal pills shipped from Guang'an Mansion have run out again. It's only been a few days, how can it be used so quickly? Zhou Mubai looked at him and frowned. Seeing him like this, Wu Guangyi frowned and said with a wry smile, Master Commander, this month our 1st city gate, 2nd city gate, and 4th city gate have all broken out more than 10 small-scale harassment battles. These 3 city gates, each city gate consumes at least 10,000 pills per day, and the speed of refining pills in Guang'an Prefecture is simply not enough. They are consuming our army's logistics. Zhou Mubai took a deep breath and said solemnly. He knew that this must have been deliberately done by the corpses on Lotus Island. Once the logistics of the coalition forces in the Eastern Defense Zone are exhausted, the so-called monks will become vulnerable. There is no detoxification pill, and no recovery pill. During the chi refining period, the continuous combatability of the monks will drop by several grades. At that time, the balance of victory will naturally tilt towards the corpse group of Lotus Island. In terms of consumption, how could a Terran cultivator be compared to a group of zombies? And they were a group of organized zombies. The coalition forces in the Eastern Defense Zone had to burn the bodies of their comrades in time, after each battle to avoid adding vitality to the enemy. But even so, there would still be cases where the corpses of the chi refining soldiers were robbed. If the logistics are not guaranteed, this situation will become more and more. In the end, the more the enemy is fighting, the more and less you are fighting. How can you fight this battle? No. It can't go on like this. Zhou Mubai's eyes narrowed. At this rate, if these 4 city gates lasted less than 10 years, the monks would be exhausted. And the most terrifying thing is not this but the morale problem. Zombies have no fear and will only obey their master's orders. But monks are not. They will be afraid, and they will choose to desert because of the heavy casualties. If the logistics cannot be guaranteed, Zhou Mubai estimates that deserters will begin to appear in the East Defense Zone within a year at most. Now everyone kills zombies and gains military exploits plus less monks die, everyone is overjoyed. But when the logistics was exhausted and the casualty rate increased greatly, even the military exploits could not stop everyone's fear of war. You must ask for help from the rear. At least let the rear guarantee the logistical resources of the front line. Think of this. Zhou Mubai walked towards a great hall in the city gate. This hall is the headquarters of the Allied forces in the Eastern Defense Zone. The decoration in the main hall is very simple. The only thing that stands out is the communication formation in the main hall. Go to the front of the communication formation. Zhou Mubai sent a message to Zhou Mingho, who was far away in Guang'an Mansion, Limba Island, the residence of the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture. Zhou Mingho looked at the message sent by Zhou Mubai's side and said, "Let's hold a battle meeting, and let fellow Daoist Jiang definitely come to participate." After thinking about it, he said again. Also informed Dushan. Yes, Patriarch. The Zhou family cultivator took the order and quickly retreated. The battle is tough. Zhou Mingho sighed. He knew that fighting against the corpses on Lotus Island was nothing at all, and the real danger had not yet been encountered by the Guang'an monks. His only hope now is that the backhand arranged by Qinyuan Jianzong is strong enough. It will allow them to get through this catastrophe. Sequoia Island, Guanhai City. The main hall of the Western Defense District headquarters. Chen Daoxian received a message from Zhou Mingho and fell into deep thought. Holding a battle meeting? It stands to reason that except for the corpse group in the East Defense Area and Lotus Island, there is not even a shadow of a zombie in the other defense areas. Even some small families began to clamor to return to the clan. For those who are not afraid of death, Chen Daoxian can only go with them. As for not regretting in the future, that is their own business. In the past 6 months, Chen Daoxian and Zhou Mubai have also used the communication method to contact several times. The last time I heard that he showed great power and wiped out tens of thousands of enemy zombies in one fell swoop. How could a battle meeting be held suddenly this time? Chen Daoxian had a vague guess in his heart, but he wasn't quite sure. If his guess is true, then it will really be the time for the Chen family to take off. Crisis, danger at the same time also means the arrival of opportunity. For the current Chen family, this corpse tied on Lotus Island is a danger, but also an opportunity. Think of this. Chen Daoxian instructed Zhou Muqing and Lei Zhan to say a few words. Together with the light, they flew in the direction of Guang'an Mansion. The communication formation method can only be used for simple communication, and it is somewhat unrealistic to use the communication formation method to hold a battle meeting. Therefore, this battle meeting must be attended by Chen Daoxian in person. Fortunately, his current speed of escaping light is astonishing, comparable to that of a cultivator in the Purple House. It only took more than half a day to arrive at the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture. Without stopping all the way, Chen Daoxian's escape light flew directly towards the Zhou family station. Wait until Chen Daoxian arrives. Found out that he was the last one to come. In fact, it is quite normal to think about it. Sequoia Island in the West Defense Zone is the farthest from Lingbei Island, and although his escaping speed can be compared to the Zifu cultivator, who is not a Zifu cultivator here, and his escaping speed is not slower than him. Sorry I'm late. Seeing Chen Daoxian, Zhou Mingho shook his head with a smile and said, since Chen Daoxian has arrived, let's start. Chapter 167. Limba Island. The main hall of the Allied Forces headquarters in Guang'an Prefecture. That's the situation now. After Zhou Mingho finished speaking, he looked at everyone. Seeing Zhou Mingho looking at him, Yang Linyuan frowned deeply and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist Zhou, my Yang family is not good at refining medicine pills, and the alchemists in the clan cannot even guarantee the supply of medicine pills for my own clan. The pills that ordinary clansmen cultivate has to rely on external purchases this matter. Saying that, Yang Linyuan shook his head. The Yang family is good at shipbuilding, but they are really not good at alchemy and alchemy. Hear this. Zhou Mingho sighed. Young Taoist Yang, let's see if we can suspend the supply of elixir to the clan, and give priority to the supply of elixir to the front line. Otherwise the East Defense Zone will be broken, and Guang'an Prefecture will be ruined. After thinking about it, Yang Linyuan nodded with difficulty. He knew that this was not the time to worry about the cultivation of the clan. The most important thing at the moment is to resist the corpse tide from spreading to Guang'an Prefecture. It is best to force them to move towards Cangzhou Xianqing, and leave this headache to the Yi family. This is also the reason why Zhou Mubai deliberately left a gap for Lotus Island on the front line, and did not encircle it. Thank you, fellow Taoist Yang, for understanding righteousness. Zhou Mingho stood up and bowed to Yang Linyuan. Young Taoist Zhou is serious. Yang Linyuan didn't dare to care, so he quickly stood up. Speaking of it, Zhou Mingho is not only a complete cultivation base of Zifu, but also much older than him. It's just that the friendship between Zhou and Yang's family is not that deep, and their seniority is completely calculated according to their cultivation. Wait until the two sit down again. Zhou Mingho still frowned. Although the Yang family promised to allocate the supply of the clan's medicinal pills to the front line, but as Yang Linyuan said, the Yang family was not good at alchemy. Also just a drop in the bucket. And his Zhou family had already transferred all the medicine supplies of the tribe to the front line. In this way, the frontline cultivators are still shouting that the medicinal pills are not enough. Actually, think about it. The 4 city gates on the front line consume an average of 30,000 to 40,000 pills per day. Although these pills are the lowest level first-order pills, they can't stand the huge number. This is still no large-scale war broke out on the front line. The two sides have been engaged in a tug-of-war and a war of attrition. Otherwise, the consumption of the medicinal pills would be more than tenfold in one day. With such a huge logistics of medicinal pills, which one can stand it, especially now that the Zhao family has been destroyed, the medicinal pill market in Guang'an Prefecture is going crazy, and the prices of all kinds of medicinal pills have skyrocketed. The Qi gathering pill, which usually costs 50 spirit stones apiece, has actually risen to 80 spirit stones at this time, and the supply is still in short supply. As for the detoxification pills, breaking evil pills, and revitalizing Qi pills that are most in demand on the front line, they have risen to sky-high prices. Just when everyone was at a loss, Chen Daoxian coughed lightly. Seeing that everyone turned their attention to him, Chen Daoxian said, "Dare to ask Senior Zhou, the medicine pills needed by the Eastern Defense Area Allied Forces are mainly low-level detoxification pills, right?" "Right." Zhou Mingho's eyes lit up. "Could it be that your Chen family?" "Right." Chen Daoxian nodded. "In the past few years, my Chen family has cultivated a number of alchemists, but the pills they refine are of lower rank, and for the time being they can only refine first-rank low-grade detoxification pills and shattering pills. And Huiqi Dan. Enough. Enough. Hear this." Zhou Mingho seemed to hear the sounds of nature. The most in demand on the front line is not the high-level pills, but the low-level pills used by the cultivators in the Qi refining stage. There are more than 900,000 cultivators on the front line of the East Defense Zone, and how many tens of thousands of base-building cultivators? Most of them are cultivators in the Qi refining period. This is the same on the front line of Izumo. It's just that the soldiers on the front line of the Izumo Kingdom are basically in the late stage of Qi refining. Few are like the Guang'an Prefecture Coalition Army. The army is filled with a large number of cultivators in the early and middle stages of Qi refining. Zhou Mingho looked at Chen Daoxian with a look of joy, and cupped his hands. "I wonder how many pills your Chen family can provide?" Yang Linyuan on the side didn't hold much expectations. In his eyes, the Chen family was recognized by the Zhou family and the Yang family, and it was more about Chen Daoxian, the Tianjiao sword cultivator. As for the Chen family itself, it is still too weak for the time being. How could such a weak family support the huge consumption of medicinal pills on the front line? But the next moment, Chen Daoxian's words almost made Yang Linyuan stare out his eyes. "My Chen family currently refines not many medicinal pills a day, only less than 10,000 of various first-order low-grade medicinal pills, but our Chen family has been stocking medicinal pills since a year ago. Now there is a lot of inventory, and it should be able to solve the urgent needs of the front line." Chen Daoxian arched his hands. Hear this. Zhou Mingho was overjoyed, while Yang Linyuan was stunned on the spot. Even the cultivator Zhang Zifu, who had been listening in, looked at Chen Daoxian in surprise. "Specific, how many?" Zhou Mingho looked at Chen Daoxian with expectant eyes. "I haven't counted the exact number, but it should be no less than 1 million, heard." Even with Zhou Mingho's palace, his heart couldn't help beating violently. 1 million pills. Even if it were 1 million low-level medicinal pills, it would take at least several hundred alchemists to refine the amount for a year without a break. With such a huge amount of medicinal pills, even the Zhou family would not be able to come up with it for a while. It's not that the Zhou family doesn't have hundreds of alchemists, but that all their medicinal pills have been supplied to the frontline defense area. As much as the Zhou family refines, they send as many medicines to the front. It stands to reason that the Zhou family, as such a huge family, should have a stockpile of medicinal herbs. However, this kind of medicine pill is not like a magic weapon. After refining, even if it is sealed in a jade bottle, it can only be stored for less than a few years, and the efficacy of the medicine will slowly lose. So in general, the medicinal pills used by the monks have just been refined, so as to ensure the maximum efficacy. There is another reason. Generally speaking, it is a bit possible for the big clan to store Qi Hui Dan. But who would store so many detoxification pills and posha pills for nothing? If it weren't for the corpse chaos, the demand for these two medicinal pills has always been very low. It is far less demanding than the medicinal pills that assist cultivation. Seeing that everyone was so excited, Chen Daoxian couldn't help pouring cold water and said, "But my Chen family doesn't have enough elixir for alchemy now." Not finished. Yang Linyuan and Zhou Mingho looked at each other and smiled, and said, "Fellow Daoist Chen, don't worry, we can supply the Chen family with as much elixir as you want. You just need to make every effort to refine the elixir." Extremely. Yang Linyuan nodded in agreement. Whether it is Lingrui City or Guang'an Prefecture Immortal City, a large number of spiritual veins have been built around thousands of miles, and the loose cultivators who survive on these spiritual veins have planted countless elixir over the years. Therefore, the most in short supply in Guang'an Mansion is probably the elixir. If the Zhao family hadn't been destroyed in this environment, there would have been more and more alchemists in Guang'an Prefecture. Think of this. Yang Linyuan didn't know what it was like in his heart. Originally, I just wanted to use the method of building spiritual veins to benefits from the Zhou family, but I didn't expect to hit it right, and now it provides sufficient raw materials for the medicinal pills consumed by the front line. Otherwise, now not only is the problem of medicinal pills unsolved, but even the raw materials for refining medicinal pills are in a hurry. Hear this. Chen Daoxian was completely relieved, since the Chen family can solve the problem of medicinal pills. Next, let's talk about the price of medicine pills. Now affected by the destruction of the Zhao family and the chaos of corpses, the entire Guang'an Prefecture's medicinal pill market has become somewhat abnormal, especially the low-level elixir that is needed in large quantities by several front lines. It is very difficult to buy spirit stones. Fellow Daoist Chen, what is the price of your elixir? Zhou Mingho asked. Relationship is relationship, business is business. Without enough profit, the Chen family would not be able to keep refining the medicinal pills. Zhou Mingho and Yang Linyuan understood the simple truth. But, if one were to buy the elixir at the current market price of Guang'an Prefecture, even with the background of the Zhou and Yang families, they would feel overwhelmed. After all, they still don't know how long this war will last. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian thought for a while and said, "It stands to reason that my Chen family, as a member of the Guang'an house, should have a share of the military expenditures of my Chen family, but my Chen family is indeed very shy. Therefore, this time the supply of medicinal herbs should be based on the previous market price." Hear this. Zhou Mingho and Yang Linyuan breathed a sigh of relief. They really didn't see the wrong person. Chen Daoxian not only had amazing talent, but also knew how to give up, know when to make the right decision. True, if Chen Daoxian does this, he will lose a lot of profits. However, as long as the Guang'an Prefecture holds on to it, the Chen family will be able to gain even greater benefits in the future. Because the Zhao family is gone, the rise of the Chen family just makes up for the Zhao family's medicine pill market. This is the biggest achievement of the Chen family. But the premise of all this is that Guang'an Prefecture can keep it. Jiedu Dan, Posha Dan, and Qihui Dan, the original market prices of the three kinds of spirit pills are all 10 spirit stones. Chen Daoxian paused. The elixir provided by my Chen family is also at this price, but I have a small request. Chen Dao, you said it bluntly. Zhou Mingho laughed. I want to settle part of this elixir with the merits of the Qinyuan sword sect. Is that okay? Hearing this, everyone turned to look at the red-haired Zifu cultivator surnamed Zhang, who had been listening in and did not speak. See everyone looking at him. The red-haired cultivator opened his eyes and said, "As long as the soldiers on the front line have no opinion, they can trade with military exploits at any time." Great. Chen Daoxian was excited for a while. Compared with spirit stones, what the Chen family lacked more at this time were all kinds of alchemy, artifact refinement, inheritance, exercises, sword tactics, etc. to enhance the family heritage. Don't say anything else. Speaking of foundation building exercises, Chen Daoxian has never switched to foundation building exercises since he broke through to the foundation building stage. On the one hand, it is because the real essence after the sword intent is more violent. Chen Daoxian needs to be carefully polished for 2 years. Another important reason, that is, Chen Daoxian did not have a suitable foundation building period. Although he had previously purchased a fire attribute foundation building exercise at the auction event, the power of that foundation building exercise was mediocre, which was not what he wanted. You must know that when a cultivator chooses a cultivation technique during the foundation building stage, he will have an opportunity to increase his true essence. Chen Daoxian certainly didn't want to make a choice so casually, and the exercises bought at the auction house are as powerful as the exercises exchanged in Qianyuan Sword Sect. Chapter 168. Shuanghu Island Industrial Zone. Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. In the brand new workshop, one after another cylindrical machines hummed, making a roar that was inconsistent with this era. The valve below the centrifugal wall breaker, strands of elixir essence keep falling, was skillfully caught by the cultivators of the Chun family's blessing generation, and then combined into a pill. Continuous practice for half a year. Countless times of blending into pills, the current cultivators of the blessing character, except for a few people, can easily blend a pill successfully with their eyes closed. After the medicinal pills were refined, they were skillfully put into jade bottles by female workers one by one, and then stored in boxes made of golden silk wood. So cooperate. Alchemists only need a simple action of synthesizing pills. As for putting the elixir into the centrifugal wall breaker, adjusting the speed of the machine, adjusting the speed at which the elixir essence flows, and filling the elixir into the bottle, they are all done by ordinary Chun clan members. Greatly improved the efficiency of alchemy, with the cooperation of the two sides for more than half a year. Whether it is an ordinary worker or a professional alchemist, the two sides have reached an excellent tacit understanding. Now, every alchemist can refine about 150 pills per day on average, which is nearly 1.5 times more efficient than the 100 pills per day at the beginning. Chen Daoyan looked at everyone's young figures and skilled operations. While feeling a little distressed, she couldn't help but feel proud of the Chun family. Such a long time. Not a single monk of the blessed generation complained of distress and tiredness. They are only 7 years old this year. Hongyin Feijian Factory. The heat wave hit people, and the furnace operators and apprentices in the factory were all sweaty. Although the monk is strong, he did not sweat. But the long-term high-intensity refining of flying swords still makes everyone mentally exhausted. However, now everyone knows the catastrophe facing Guang'an Prefecture. Although they can't go to the front to kill the enemy, but producing magic weapons in the rear is no less effective than the soldiers on the front. Therefore, even the monks of the blessing generation, under the training of the monks of the Taoist generation, began to refine the first-order low-grade red shadow flying sword one by one. As for the earliest batch of Taoist monks, they have already begun to refine the first-order high-grade flying swords. Compared to Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory, Hongyin Feijian Factory has a much wider range of instruments and grades. Chongping No. 1 Xiuxian Primary School. Chen Xianhe is explaining the matters needing attention in practicing Guiyuan for the newly enrolled monks of the Fuzi generation. Seemed to hear the birdsong outside the window. Chen Xianhe couldn't help looking out the window, and his thoughts gradually drifted further and further away. Old Patriarch. A Xianmiao of the Fu character generation seemed to notice that Chen Xianhe was distracted, and could not help calling out softly. "I'm fine." Chen Xianhe smiled. "Let's continue. Where did we just talk about?" "Yes, the technique of refining ore." Overlooked from above, the entire Shuanghu Island presents a thriving scene. But compared to the sparsely populated Shuanghu Island, Guanhai City on Sequoia Island is called the real prosperity. Thanks to the concerted efforts of the monks, Guanhai City has been almost completely completed. Leftover means that with the further expansion of the population, the urban circle continues to expand outward. The city structure of Wanxinghai is the same. The inner city of Guanhai City is the location of Xiancheng. However, now this fairy city can only be regarded as a large market at most. But as monks continue to gather towards Sequoia Island, this square city will definitely gradually evolve into a fairy city in the future. No one would doubt this. Xiancheng always has the characteristics of attracting monks, because the immortal cities are built on the spiritual veins, and the scattered cultivators lack spiritual energy cultivation. This is also the reason why the Yang family built the spiritual veins for the scattered cultivators, and the scattered cultivators are so excited. Limba Island, the Great Hall of the Allied Forces headquarters in Guang'an Prefecture. I asked, the soldiers in the East Defense Zone are willing to exchange their military exploits for medicinal pills. After communicating with the East Defense Zone again, Zhou Mingho said. Chen Daoxian looked at Zhou Mingho and asked, if I don't know how to settle it by military merit, how to settle it? This point let Daozhang speak heard the words. The red-haired cultivator surnamed Zhang nodded and said, according to the regulations of the Qinyuan sword sect, there are 2 types of merits in frontline battles, small merits and great merits. 100 minor merits can be exchanged for 1 major merit. In the frontline battlefield, a small effort can be exchanged for a spiritual stone. It's just that spirit stones cannot be exchanged for small merits. Chen Daoxian nodded clearly and exchanged unilaterally. After pondering for a moment, Chen Daoxian said, so 10 small works can buy 1 medicinal pill? Heard the words. The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang gave Chen Daoxian a deep look and smiled. Although Qinyuan Jianzong can't exchange spirit stones for military merits, privately, among soldiers, the exchange ratio of small merits and spirit stones is 10. Small work in exchange for 12 spirit stones. Zhou Mingho on the side of waved his hand and said, just follow the price that Du Chan said. Then looked at Chen Daoxian and said, how many military exploits do you plan to exchange? I plan to exchange 50% of the spiritual pills supplied by the Chen family for military merits. 50%. Zhou Mingho nodded, okay. No problem. On behalf of the Guang'an Prefecture Allied Forces, I agree to your Chen family's request. Thank you, Senior Zhou. Chen Daoxian arched his hand. No, it should be me thanking you. Zhou Mingho said solemnly, if you win this battle, your Chen family's contribution is great. Don't dare, don't dare. Chen Daoxian waved his hands again and again. But he also knew that the Chen family did a lot of credit for supporting the shaky logistics of the Guang'an Allied Forces at this time. Next, the Zhou family directly dispatched 2 Lingshu battleships, together with Chen Daoxian, to return to Shuanghu Island to get the spiritual elixir. 1 day later, Chen Daoxian returned with the 2 spirit void battleships. Far away, he saw Zhou Mingho waiting eagerly in front of the headquarters hall. Seeing that boxes of elixir were removed from the Spirit Void battleship, Zhou Mingho couldn't wait to step forward, opened the wooden box, and looked at the bottled elixir in the wooden box. Zhou Mingho's face was full of joy. Good, good, good. Zhou Mingho took out a bottle of elixir at random, opened the seal, and a scent of medicine wafted through his nostrils. Is the detoxification pill that is in short supply on the front line. Seeing Zhou Mingho check the medicinal pills in person, Chen Daoxian introduced, this time my Chen family brought a total of 540,000 detoxification pills, 300,000 broken evil pills, and 230,000 Qi Hui pills, a total of 1.07 million spirit pills. Dan. Zhou Mingho's consciousness was swept away, and he knew that what Chen Daoxian said was not bad. Nodded immediately and said, according to the price we agreed, 50% of the pills will be paid for with spiritual stones, and the other 50% will be paid for military merits. The coalition forces in the Eastern Defense Area will need to pay your Chen family 35 million spiritual stones and 53,500 great merits. I have prepared the spirit stone for you, you can withdraw it at any time. As for the military exploits. He looked at the red-haired purple manor monk beside him. The red-haired monk nodded and said, since the soldiers on the front line are willing to pay for their military exploits, I can transfer the military exploits of the coalition forces in the Eastern Defense Zone to your Chen family. Finished. I saw him take out a disc-shaped instrument and tap it lightly. Immediately, a screen of light projected in front of everyone. This is the Arc Shadow Disc, a special instrument specially made by Qinyuan Jianzong to record military exploits. To briefly introduce, the red-haired monk kept sliding his fingertips on the light curtain projection. When Chen Daoxian saw this scene, he suddenly felt like watching a holographic projection in a high-tech movie. The red-haired cultivator didn't know what Chen Daoxian was thinking, and after some manipulations, he nodded and said, okay, the 53,500 meritorious deeds have all been allocated to your name. You can use these military exploits to exchange for various resources given by Qinyuan sword sect. Finished. He handed Chen Daoxian a jade slip. Here records the types and prices of resources that can be exchanged in Qinyuan Jianzong. You can take it back and learn more about it. Said with an inexplicable smile on his face, it's the first time I've seen that people who haven't been on the front line can get so many military exploits. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan's expression froze slightly. Seems to think that Chen Daoxian has misunderstood. The red-haired cultivator waved his hand and said, "Fellow Daoist Chen, don't misunderstand. I just think that your Chen family cultivator's luck is really good. By the good words of my predecessors, my Chen family cultivator has always had good luck." Hearing this, the red-haired monk stopped talking. Actually, Chen Daoxian also knew that. This red-haired cultivator from the Purple Mansion, as a cultivator from the front line, must have gone through countless battles to get to where he is today. Unfortunately, his fighting for so many years is actually not as good as Chen Daoxuan's business this time. Such a huge disparity, how could it not make him feel uneasy? In a flash, he also understood that these military exploits were not owned by Chen Daoxian alone, but were earned by the hundreds of alchemists of the Chen family who worked hard for a year, so he had nothing to be jealous of. Went back to the Lingfu where the Zhou family had prepared for him. Chen Daoxian impatiently took out the jade slip in the storage bag and looked over it carefully. The resources given by Qianyuan Jianzong are almost everything. But in general, they are roughly divided into two categories. The first one is knowledge. The second is the material category. The so-called knowledge category includes exercises, spells, alchemy inheritance, utensil refining inheritance, talisman inheritance, formation inheritance, puppet art. The material category is all kinds of treasures, such as unprocessed spiritual minerals, spiritual medicines, spiritual plants, and even all kinds of rare spiritual things. There are also processed treasures, such as instruments, elixir, charms, array plates, and so on. Look through it roughly. In general, it is the most cost-effective to exchange for knowledge-based resources with military exploits, but it is not as cost-effective to exchange for material-based resources as to buy them with spirit stones. The various resources in the jade slip simply dazzled Chen Daoxian, and he didn't know how to choose. Fortunately, he had a clear goal this time. First of all, it must be exchanged for cultivation techniques for the family monks. At present, the Chen family has only one foundation building exercise, Qiyang Gong, which was purchased from the auction house last time. This exercise is not bad, but it is indeed too common, and the range of choices is too narrow. In the future, the cultivators of the Chen family will not all practice one type of exercise. If there is a monk with a water attribute spirit body in the Chen family in the future, wouldn't there be no exercises to practice? Therefore, for the 5 elements, the Chen family must have at least one foundation building period and even the Zifu period. And it is best to use the kind of exercise with a very high ceiling. For example, Qianyuan Jianzong's Zhenzong Gongfa, Qianyuan Sword Classic, is such a very high-capacity method. Chen Daoxian searched carefully and found that the Qianyuan Sword Classic was listed impressively. I heard before that Qianyuan Jianzong's General Sex Zhenzong exercises were exchanged for the monks on the front line. Now I look at it and it is true. Chen Daoxian took a closer look and found some differences. Chapter 169. Qianyuan Sword Sutra is indeed available for frontline monks to exchange, but it is only limited to the content of the Foundation Establishment period and the Purple Palace period. Follow-up exercises can also be exchanged with Qianyuan Jianzong, but then the monks must go to Qianyuan Jianzong to exchange them in person. This is to prevent the enemies of Izumo from breaking into Wangxinghai and defrauding Qianyuan Jianzong's Zhenzong exercise. Sure enough, there are restrictions. Chen Daoxian nodded. That's right, if there are no restrictions at all, Chen Daoxian will be surprised. You must know that this Qianyuan Sword Classic is said to be passed down by Qian Yuanzi, the founder of the Qianyuan Sword sect. And Qian Yuanzi is the true immortal of Mahayana, the kind of powerful cultivator who finally ascended to the upper realm. The exercises he left behind were actually spread so widely by the younger generations. This moment, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but be very curious about the suzerain of Qianyuan Sword sect. What kind of person could have such great courage and actually spread the Zhongzong method to the world without hesitation? At least, let Chen Daoxian now spread the knowledge of Chen family's unique industrial alchemy and tool refining. He is not very willing, although he knew that doing so would quickly increase the strength of the entire Wanxinghai. But whether Chen Daoxian is short-sighted or only considers his own family, he cannot be so selfless and spread the knowledge of industrialization to the world. At least in the eyes of Chen Daoxian now, The only people who can be truly recognized by him are the 13th uncle and the Chan family cultivators whose blood is thicker than water. The foundation building period, Qianyuan Sword Sutra, requires 10,000 great deeds. And the Zifu period, Qianyuan Sword Sutra. Sigh. Chan Daoxian took a deep breath. 100,000 great merits is equivalent to 10,000 spiritual stones. Just such a practice that is only limited to oneself, it is actually equivalent to a third-order spiritual vein. He thought he had 53,500 great merits and was already very rich, but after seeing the exchange price of the Qianyuan Sword Classic, he felt that he was still very poor. He now vaguely understands why the sect master of Qianyuan Sword Sect would take out this top-level exercise and exchange it. I would like to ask the monks who practice the Qianyuan Sword Sutra, in the foundation building period, are they willing to switch to other exercises with mediocre power after entering the Zifu in the future? Certainly not reconciled. Since he is not reconciled, he has to work hard to earn military exploits and swear to the death for Qianyuan Jianzong. It can be said that Qianyuan Jianzong only used this technique to capture the hearts of thousands of swordsmen in Wan Xinghai. And what is the combat power of the sword cultivator? Chan Daoxian himself has experience as a sword cultivator. He has no doubt now that Zhou Mubai must be practicing this technique. As a sword cultivator, as a cultivator who claims to be the same level of combat power ceiling, no one wants to be weaker than other cultivators. Even Zhou Mubai failed to comprehend the sword intent during the qi refining period, and he was always upset, because compared to Chan Daoxian, he lost an opportunity to temper his infuriating energy, and he was always 1 point weaker than Chan Daoxian of the same rank. For swordsmen, this weak point is often the gap between heaven and earth. Change. He glanced at the Qianyuan Sword Sutra of the foundation building period and decided to exchange it. Continue reading. Chan Daoxian no longer rummaged in the knowledge category, but in the elixir category. Found it. Chan Daoxian's face was full of surprise. Millennium Vermilion Fruit. Looking at the red jade-like spiritual fruit in the jade slip, Chan Daoxian's face was full of excitement. This is exactly the 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit he saw at the Guang'an House auction event. It is said that it has the effect of prolonging life for 30 years. This time, Chan Daoxian no longer had to be discouraged by Uncle 13, and decided to exchange it decisively. The exchange price of Millennium Zhugua is 15,000 great merits, which is half more expensive than the Qianyuan Sword Sutra in the foundation period. But Chan Daoxian thinks it's worth it. Without Uncle 13's silent persistence, the Chan family may have vanished long ago, and there is no place for today's rise. All the cultivators of the Chan family should appreciate the credit of Chan Xianhe. This treasure of longevity, Chan Xianhe, deserves it. Decided to exchange the Qianyuan Sword Sutra and the Millennium Vermilion Fruit in the foundation building period. Chan Daoxian only has 28,500 meritorious deeds left. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency in his heart. Look for other 5-element exercises. Chan Daoxian took a deep breath and continued to find a method for the future foundation building monks of the Chan family. Soon, 5 elements cultivation techniques with the highest upper limit up to the nascent soul stage were selected by Chan Daoxian. Of course, he is worth exchanging for this part of the foundation establishment stage, a complete exercise that goes directly to the nascent soul stage, which is not something Chan Daoxian can exchange. There is actually a difference between personal exchange and family exchange. In exchange for this exercise, Chan Daoxian had a headache. The Qianyuan Sword Classic he chose was a personal exchange. That is to say, when he redeems this practice, he must make an oath of the Great Way, and he can only practice it himself and cannot pass it on to others. And the family exchange is that this exercise can be practiced by all the cultivators of the Chan family. The exchange price of this exercise is 10 times more expensive than the personal exchange. In fact, after careful calculation, family exchange is definitely more cost-effective than personal exchange, because it is impossible for a normal family to have only 10 monks. The inheritance of the refining equipment that the monks of the Chan family Xianzi generation exchanged for Qianyuan Jianzong was the family exchange. Chan Daoxian turned back to the introduction of Qianyuan Sword Classic again, and found that there was no family exchange, only personal exchange. See this? His face was full of anger. I thought I could pick up a big bargain, But I didn't expect that Qianyuan Jianzong had already considered everything. Think carefully. Since this war merit system has been implemented for 400 years, even if there were loopholes, it must have been blocked by Qianyuan Jianzong long ago. Forget it anyway. Besides me, my Chen family doesn't have a second sword cultivator. It would be a waste to exchange 10 times the price for this Qianyuan sword classic. Chen Daoxian comforted himself. Individuals can exchange the 5 elements of the foundation building period with 2,500 great merits, but for family exchanges, the price is 10 times higher and requires 25,000 great merits now. Chen Daoxian only has 3,500 great merits left. High-level exercises that can be practiced to the nascent soul stage are too expensive. Chen Daoxian's face was full of distress. This is only a part of the foundation building period. If the complete exercise is exchanged, wouldn't it be ruined? Now he finally knows what Qianyuan Jianzong relies on to pay for the military expenses of countless monks on the front line, is to rely on these intangible knowledge such as exercises, spells, swordsmanship, inheritance, and so on. And these are what the loose cultivators and even the family cultivators lack the most. As for family cultivators or loose cultivators who get these exercises, their strength will grow, and they will be able to compete with Qianyuan sword sect. Is totally overthinking it. Qianyuan sword sect in the process of attacking Chuyun Kingdom, most of the plundered resources were digested and absorbed by it. In addition, Qianyuan Jianzong's basic plan in the underwater world of Wuxia and its various inheritances are more complete and complex than any force in Wuxia. In addition, it has an uncountable mortal population in its vast territory, and its legacy as a Mahayana true immortal lineage. I feel that I have acquired a few exercises and I want to resist the Qianyuan sword sect. The end is definitely 100 times worse than the real Shinjue. Shinjue Jinren still got the complete inheritance of immortals, and there is also a fairy mansion cave where he can escape. The major families of Wan Xinghai, including the Yuanying family, which one has this condition. There is still 3,500 great merits. What can I exchange for it? Chen Daoxian rummaged through the jade slip again. Can be said that he wants everything in it. Whether it is various inheritances or substantial treasures, it can quickly increase the strength of the Chen family. But helpless. Too few military exploits. Oh, I'll choose you. After searching for a long time, Chen Daoxian reluctantly withdraws his consciousness from the jade slip. What he finally chose was not inheritance, not treasure, but a formation, to be precise, a fourth-order mountain protection formation. Logically speaking, arranging a fourth-order array is beyond Chen Daoxian's ability. However, he has the Hongming Enlightenment Classic hanging on it, and he has a deep knowledge of the formation method. I believe that with careful study, he will be able to arrange this formation method sooner or later. He glanced at the various formation materials of this fourth-order mountain protection formation. Is not a rare thing, it is something that can be purchased in Guang'an Prefecture. Since it's something that Guang'an Prefecture can buy, isn't it just a matter of spending some spirit stones? This spiritual stone, not to mention that the Chen family is not short of it now. There are still nearly 70 million spiritual stones, lying in the main hall of the Western Defense District headquarters alone. To know. Arranging the mountain protection formation is not only a matter of the Chen family. Seaview City on Sequoia Island also needs to arrange this formation. The Chen family bought the knowledge of the great formation of protecting the mountain, and the spirit stones in the West Defense area were used to buy the materials for the formation. It was very fair and no one could say a word. Seeing that he only had 500 great merits left, Chen Daoxian put the jade slip into the storage bag in distress. Now that it has been decided, I will go to the red-haired monk surnamed Zhang to exchange it tomorrow. 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit may need to be specially transported, but all kinds of knowledge inheritance he should be able to get it on the spot. These things he has already asked Zhou Mingho to learn more about them. The next day, Chen Daoxian registered the various resources he wanted to exchange one by one. The red-haired monk followed Chen Daoxian's words and his cheeks kept twitching. Are you sure you want to exchange the Qianyuan sword classic for this exercise? Sure. Chen Daoxian nodded. Make an oath. Immediately, Chen Daoxian made an oath to promise not to spread the Qianyuan sword classic. Next moment, the red-haired friar took out the arc shadow disc and moved it on it again. Soon, A slender beam of light shot out from the arc shadow disk and went straight to the center of Chen Daoxuan's eyebrows. Chen Daoxian knew that this was the normal procedure for exchanging exercises. He then closed his eyes. In the next second, a mysterious and unusual exercise appeared in his sea of consciousness. Before taking a closer look, Chen Daoxian opened his eyes and looked curiously at the arc shadow plate in the other's hand, saying, "This magic weapon is really amazing. Of course, this is an important guarantee for the perfect implementation of my Qianyuan Jianzong war merit system. Otherwise, it would be so easy for countless cultivators on the front line to exchange merit methods." Heard this, Chen Daoxian nodded in agreement. He is also an artifact refiner, and he can clearly know how amazing the talent that the person who refines this artifact possesses. Chen Daoxian created new instruments, relying on the Hongming Enlightenment Classic, to store his understanding, and this item refiner relies entirely on his own amazing talent. A glimpse of the leopard in the pipe can be seen. What a crouching tiger, hidden dragon in Qianyuan Jianzong. Chapter 170. The knowledge of the 6 exercises and formations was transmitted to Chen Daoxuan's sea of knowledge. Even with his spiritual strength comparable to that of a cultivator in the Purple House, also felt a little exhausted. The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang glanced at Chen Daoxian and said, "The 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit you want will take some time to be delivered." Hearing this, Chen Daoxian frowned. "After a while?" "Right," the red-haired cultivator inquired and said, "You are lucky. Cangzhou Xianqing happens to have a frontline transport ship at the moment, and it can come over in about 3 days. However, the shipping fee is yours to pay." "Shipping fee?" Chen Daoxian looked surprised. "Of course there is a transportation fee, otherwise a frontline transport ship will make a trip just for you. How much face do you have to have?" Hearing this, Chen Daoxian said helplessly, "Didn't you say that the frontline transport ship is in Cangzhou Xianqing? Can't I get it myself?" Hearing the words, the red-haired cultivator's face was full of deep meaning. Transporting various resources for the frontline soldiers can also be regarded as a fortune for an adult in Qianyuan Jianzong. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "This?" Chen Daoxian bowed his hands. "Junior doesn't know about it. I hope Senior will forgive me. Involves the interests of the top officials of Qianyuan Jianzong, so he will naturally not break this rule and only make others unhappy. It's just about spending some spirit stones or military exploits. There's no need to offend people." Seeing Chen Daoxian being so knowledgeable, the red-haired cultivator couldn't help but think highly of him. In Wuxia, there are many talented cultivators who are frivolous and ignorant when they are young, but unknowingly offend many people they cannot afford to offend. These monks often end up miserably. Obviously, the sword cultivator named Chen Daoxian in front of him knows how to advance and retreat, and how to choose. At this moment he finally understood why the Zhou family and the Yang family were so optimistic about the young monk in front of him. Is definitely not just because of his kendo talent but also other qualities in him. If a person has only talent but he makes enemies everywhere, this kind of person is destined to not go far. Only people like Chen Daoxian who are talented and have a good government can go a long way on the complicated path of cultivation. To transport a 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit from Cangzhou Xianqing to this point, you need to pay 100 great merits, or 10,000 spirit stones. You can choose any payment method. "I choose to use spirit stones." The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang nodded. Chen Daoxuan's choice was not surprising to him. On the frontline battlefield of Izumo, most monks who need to exchange special resources use spiritual stones to pay for transportation. After all, meritorious deeds can buy many resources that cannot be purchased by spirit stones. In the eyes of monks, it is much more precious than spirit stones. Otherwise, it will not be possible to exchange 12 spirit stones among soldiers for 10 small work. Waited less than 3 days. A ray of light galloped toward the Zhou family's residence in Xiancheng, Guang'an Prefecture. Chen Daoxian stood in front of the main hall. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he found that the person in front of him was also a cultivator of the Purple Mansion, but his cultivation was too low, so he could not tell which level of cultivation he was in the Purple Mansion. But he could feel that the other party was by no means an early cultivator of the Purple Mansion. The person who came was wearing a blue Taoist robe, with a jade crown on his head holding up Taoism. His face was thin, and he looked in good spirits. Seeing the monk surnamed Zhang Zifu, the visitor immediately bowed his hands and said, "Brother Zhang." The red-haired monk surnamed Zhang nodded. "Have you brought something?" "Bring it, that's it," said the visitor. Took out a jade box from the storage bag, and the entire jade box was banned and sealed. "See you." The red-haired cultivator surnamed Zhang took the jade box from the young Zifu cultivator and handed it to Chan Daoxuando. "The 1,000-year-old vermilion fruit you want, check it out." "Okay." Chen Daoxian couldn't wait to take the jade box and immediately lifted the ban on the jade box. After checking it carefully, he nodded and said, "It's right." After he finished speaking, he looked at the Zifu cultivator who delivered the goods for him and thanked him, "Senior Lao." "No trouble, no trouble. If there is such a good thing in the future, just call me more. My name is Zheng Heng." This Zifu cultivator named Zheng Heng bowed his hands politely and did not look down on Chan Daoxian because of his low cultivation. Seeing him looking at him eagerly, Chan Daoxian immediately took out a storage bag from his waist, handed it over and said, "This is the spirit stone I prepared, senior, please take a look." Heard the words. Zheng Heng took the storage bag without hesitation, immersed his consciousness into the storage bag in front of the two of them, and counted them. It doesn't take a moment. Zheng Heng raised his head, smiled and cupped his hands. "Yes, it is exactly 10,000 spirit stones." Chen Daoxian hurriedly returned the salute. Zheng Heng nodded, greeted the red-haired monk surnamed Zhang, and disappeared in front of the two of them. Watching Zheng Heng leave, Chen Daoxian bowed his hands to the red-haired monk surnamed Zhang and said, "That being the case, it is time for the junior to return to the West Defense Zone to sit in town." The red-haired monk nodded and said, "Walk slowly, no delivery. Farewell." "Say it." Chen Daoxian flew towards Shuanghu Island together. This time, Chen Daoxian had to go back and digest it properly in order to exchange his military exploits for various resources. To his surprise, the price of high-level exercises is too expensive. But fortunately, in Wuxia, monks actually have a way to get high-level exercises. The practice of Qianyuan sword sect undoubtedly gave the lowest-level scattered cultivators a ladder to high-level cultivators. This is also the reason why, for 400 years, there has been an endless stream of middle and high-level cultivators. Less than half a day, Chen Daoxian converged and landed on the spiritual vein of the Chen family on Shuanghu Island. Feeling the abundant aura of the second-order spiritual veins, Chen Daoxian couldn't help showing a smile on his face. The consciousness swept away without alarming anyone. Chen Daoxian hurried straight towards the clan. Chongping No. 1 Xiuxian Primary School. The second batch of Xianmiao of Fuzi generation has been in school for half a year. Clanology. In addition to Chan Xianhe, an old teacher who has been here all the year round, young Taoist monks often come to the clan as a guest teacher to teach all kinds of knowledge to the children of Fuzi. On the contrary, it was Chen Daoxian because he was busy in the family. In the past 2 years, there are only a handful of hours in the ethnology. Even the kendo classes and talisman classes he taught were often absent due to lack of teachers. Kendo class is fine. Chen Xianhe can temporarily substitute. After all, Chen Xianhe has been immersed in the wind-chasing sword art for a lifetime and has already reached the realm of culmination. Pointing at the cultivator of the Fuzi generation who doesn't understand anything, there is still no problem. Talisman-making class, there is no monk in the Chen family who can replace Chen Daoxian. Because other than Chen Daoxian, the Chen family did not have any monks who knew how to make magic charms. At the moment, when Chen Daoxian walked to the door of the classroom, Chen Xianhe was teaching kendo lessons on his behalf. The essence of wind-chasing sword art lies in a quick word, Chen Xianhe said, and took out a red shadow flying sword from the storage bag. The red shadow flying sword circled above everyone's heads under his control. Not for a while. The red shadow flying sword turned into a phantom, which could not be seen clearly. When the flying sword is approaching a certain level, it will not only increase its power, but also make the enemy hard to guard against. If you cultivate to the extreme before the cultivator's consciousness can react, your flying sword has already taken off the opponent's head. The words fall. The flying sword suddenly disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. In the next instant, the flying sword suddenly appeared in front of the forehead of a monk of the blessing generation, and hovered suddenly. Wow! In the classroom, The monks of the Fu character generation clapped their hands, and a thunderous applause erupted. Ha ha ha. Seeing this scene, Chen Xianhe stroked his beard and laughed happily. Compared with the boring and complicated knowledge of alchemy, the flying sword class always makes it easier for the monks of the blessing generation to feel obsessed. Unfortunately, Chan Daoxian, who set up this course, did not seriously teach a few kendo lessons to monks of the Fuzi generation from beginning to end. Outside the classroom, Chan Daoxian couldn't help laughing when he saw such a harmonious scene between the old and the young of the Chan family. On campus, Chen Xianhe and Chen Daoxian walk side by side on the avenue of the campus. Your breath-holding technique is getting more and more powerful. Standing by my side, I didn't even know you were back. Chen Xianhe Songlau's face was full of complicated colors. Chen Daoxian smiled and said, "It's not that my breath-holding technique is excellent, it's that Uncle 13 is too serious in your teaching, and that's why you didn't realize that I came back." Heard the words. Chen Xianhe smiled and waved his hand. "Don't console me. I'm not a child. Haha." After finished speaking, the conversation changed. "By the way, how did the medicine pills you sell to the front line sell well? Half of it is settled with spirit stones, and half of it is with military merit, for a total of 53,500 great merits. So much." Chen Xianhe glanced at him in surprise, calculated a little and nodded. "So we made a profit, although one small merit can be exchanged for one spirit stone. But if you want to use spirit stone to buy battle merit, you have to pay a lot of premium." "Indeed." Chen Daoxian nodded. Immediately, he took out a jade box and said with a smile, "By the way, I bought you a gift for Uncle 13 on this trip." Seeing this, Chen Xianhe paused slightly. He took the jade box handed over by Chen Daoxian with a surprised look, and slowly opened it after the restriction was lifted. "I see. A red jade-like spiritual fruit, lying quietly in the jade box. 1,000. Millennium vermilion fruit?" Chen Xian's voice trembled slightly, and looked at Chen Daoxian suddenly, not knowing what to say. Daoxian thought that my Chen family still needs Uncle 13 to work for the family for a while. After finished speaking, he looked at Chen Xianhe with a smile on his face. Heard the words. Chen Xianhe was in a very complicated mood. If you ask Chen Xianhe if he is afraid of death, he must be afraid of death. Anyone who is still conscious is not afraid of death. But let Chen Xianhe sacrifice his family interests in exchange for his survival, he would rather die. Just. Chen Xianhe knew that this jade box contained not only the interests of the family, but also Chen Daoxian's affection for him. "I accepted your gift." Chen Xianhe breathed a sigh of relief, raised his head and said with a smile. Heard this. Chen Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. Although he bought this millennium vermilion fruit without the knowledge of Uncle 13, Uncle 13, who knew its price, was likely to sell it. Because in Chen Xian's opinion, it is unwise to spend more than 1,000,000 spirit stones for his family, who is destined to be unable to build a foundation. But Chen Xianhe also knows that in this world, not everything can be measured by interests. Is like Chen Daoxian's feelings for him. He has always taught Chen Daoxian to have feelings for the family since he was a child, and not to abandon the family. Of course, it also includes feelings for him, Chen Xianhe. If Chen Daoxian is in the interests of the family, he can give up Chen Xianhe. Then one day will he also give up the entire family for profit? Thinking of this, Chen Xianhe was naturally relieved. He felt that his teaching to Chen Daoxian was successful. In these years, Chen Daoxian's actions have lived up to his earnest teachings, the expectations of the Chen family's ancestors, and the Chen family's younger generations. So what was his reason for rejecting this gift? Chapter 171. Twin Lakes Island. In Chen Daoxian's Spirit Palace. In front of Lingtan, Chen Daoxian crossed his knees on the futon made by Wenyu, slowly closed his eyes, and his consciousness sank into the sea of consciousness space. In the sea of consciousness space, in the most central position, the golden scriptures seem to be immortal and towering mountains, suppressing the sea of knowledge space. Surrounding the golden scriptures are 9 faint stardust. They chase each other, keep spinning mysterious and beautiful. Deeper in the sea of knowledge space, there are clusters of light emitting rays of light. These light clusters store all the knowledge Chen Daoxian has learned in his past and present life. There are professional knowledge of machinery in the past life, as well as the knowledge of exercises, swordsmanship, tool refining, alchemy, and talisman practice in this life, and so on. These clusters of light vary in size. But there are 7 light groups which are a bit out of tune with the other light groups, as if they were forcibly stuffed into the sea of consciousness space. Chen Daoxian knew. The knowledge stored in these 7 light groups is precisely what the red-haired cultivator surnamed Zhang held in the arc shadow disk and forcibly stuffed it into his sea of consciousness. Among them, including the exercise that Chen Daoxian will practice next, Qinyuan Sword Classic. Take a deep breath. Chen Daoxian sank his consciousness into the light group that reproduced the Qinyuan Sword Sutra. Next second, Chen Daoxian only felt that his head suddenly exploded. Countless mysterious exercises and profound meanings rushed towards him like a tide. Chen Daoxian restrained his mind and accepted and absorbed the knowledge of these exercises as if they were swallowed whole. Otherwise, it is not easy for him to comprehend the Qinyuan Sword Classic by himself. Chen Daoxian knew that the more top-level exercises, the more difficult it would be to cultivate. The difficulty here, the first level, is the comprehension of the exercises. Some cultivators at the foundation establishment stage, even if they have obtained top-level exercises, cannot even understand the most basic understanding, let alone start practicing. Chen Daoxian has the assistance of the Hongming Enlightenment Classic, and he has never been afraid of single understanding. With the complete reading of the Qinyuan Sword Sutra, foundation building exercises content, Chen Daoxian's face became a little weird. The road to the strongest sword cultivation recorded in the Qinyuan Sword Classic is much more detailed than the introduction to the swordsmanship jade slip given by Zhou Mubai. In this practice, it mentions a concept called limit states. The so-called limit state is the limit quality that the cultivator can achieve in the cultivation base, true qi, true essence, and mana. For example, when Chen Daoxian was in the qi refining period, he used the sword intent to temper his true qi. Compared with the qi refining cultivator of the same cultivation level, it is 3 times stronger. This state is called the limit state by the Qinyuan Sword Classic. To reach this limit state, sword intent tempering is just one of the means. Some monks have talents that other monks cannot envy, such as various spiritual bodies and treasures. This special physique, after cultivating the exercises of the corresponding attributes, will also have a tempering effect on one's own true qi, true essence, and mana. For example, Yang family Tianjiao Yang Gongwan's water spirit body has this kind of tempering effect. However, compared with Jianxiu's sword intent, the tempering effect is slightly worse. If there is a person who possesses this kind of spiritual body and comprehends the sword intent, wouldn't that be able to double temper his own true essence, so as to achieve the effect that his true essence surpasses the mana of the cultivator of Zifu? But in fact, it is true that double tempering can be achieved, but the effect of the second tempering will be greatly reduced. A foundation-building cultivator, no matter how tempered his true essence is, will not exceed the mana of even the most common Zifu cultivator. At most, it can only reach 70% to 80% of the mana of the cultivator of Zifu. The true essence of this state is described as the ultimate true essence in the Qinyuan Sword Sutra. There are not many ways to achieve this ultimate true essence. One is as mentioned above, with both a spirit body and sword intent in the foundation building stage, and under double tempering, this limit state can be reached. There is one more. Just like Chen Daoxian, although he does not have a spiritual body, he has already tempered his true qi with sword intent during the qi refining period. The background is even more than that of other swordsmen. There is also a chance to reach this ultimate true essence. But no matter how monstrous the cultivator is, no matter how many times he tempers his true essence, he can only reach this limit state of true essence at most. Because of the so-called limit state true essence, if one step forward, it will transform into the mana of the Zifu cultivator. It is impossible for the real essence to be stronger than the mana. It is far stronger than mana, which proves that it has transformed into mana. Seeing this, Chen Daoxian's previous thought that true yuan would grow infinitely under the tempering of sword intent shattered like a bubble. How can there be such a detailed explanation for the ordinary foundation building exercises? The value of these 10,000 great gong flowers. Chen Daoxian grinned. Some doubts about the foundation building stage cultivation in the past were all solved at this moment. As Chen Daoxian continued to watch Qinyuan Sword Sutra, He stood up from time to time and paced the courtyard in excitement. From time to time, he gestured in his hands, verifying his previous conjectures about cultivation at the foundation establishment stage. At this moment, he really realized the gap between top-level exercises and ordinary foundation building exercises. After the sword cultivator understands the sword intent, he can actually create his own sword art. Seeing this content recorded in the Qinyuan Sword Classic, Chen Daoxuan's eyes lit up. He suddenly remembered. When he and Zhou Mubai were investigating Lotus Island together, they were trapped in a great formation of corpses and blood. The sword trick that Zhou Gol finally burst out. He seems to have never seen it in the exchanged jade slips of Qinyuan Jianzong. Think of this. Chen Daoxian took out the exchanged jade slip of Qinyuan Jianzong from the storage bag again. Looking through it carefully again, I didn't find the Qinglian sword art that Mubai used. Think so. This Qinglian sword art should have been created by Zhou Mubai himself. Zhou Mubai's sword intent realm had long since broken through the invisible realm, reaching the second-level visible realm, and he had walked a considerable distance from the second-level visible realm. It is estimated that they are almost touching the threshold of the third heavy sword intent. Compare. When Chen Daoxian was building the foundation, his kendo realm advanced greatly, but he just crossed the threshold of the tangible realm. Until now, his kendo level was still far behind Zhou Mubai's. However, Chen Daoxian was not discouraged. After all, compared with Zhou Mubai, the age gap between the two is too big. Chen Daoxuan's own kendo talent may be far inferior to Zhou Mubai, but with the blessing of Hongming Enlightenment Classic, he believes that his kendo talent is no less than that of any kendo genius in the world. This is called lack of talent plugins to make up. Call. After reading the entire contents of Qinyuan Sword Classic, Chen Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief. Just wait for tomorrow. After accumulating 10 stardust, he began to comprehend this practice, and when he was thoroughly comprehended, he would begin to practice the Qinyuan Sword Sutra. For monks, converting to practice is a very troublesome thing. The lower the cultivation base, the smaller the price paid for switching to the cultivation technique. It is basically a common choice for all people to switch to practice during the foundation building period. Generally, the exercises cultivated by monks in the Qi period are some non-attribute peace exercises. Although the power is average, they are better than neutral and peaceful. When the foundation is established, there is no obstacle to switching to other exercises. But if the cultivator cultivated to the Purple Mansion or even the Jindan cultivation base, and then wanted to switch to the cultivation method, the price to pay would be huge. According to legend, there was once a Jindan cultivator who was moved after he got a practice that was especially suitable for him. Then he chose to switch to this practice. As a result, it took nearly 50 years of time before and after the practice to completely turn around. To know, 50 years is quite a long time even for a Jindan cultivator. After all, Jindan cultivator's lifespan is only 800 years old. And this cultivator must have spent hundreds of years cultivating to the golden core stage. That is to say, the life essence he actually has left is only a few hundred years. 50 years of time were wasted all at once just to switch to another practice, and there was no progress in the cultivation during this time. Perhaps this Jindan cultivator completely lost the opportunity to break through the nascent soul stage because of the practice of cultivation. How big the loss is, any cultivator with a slightly clearer mind can measure it. Of course, the cost of switching to cultivation techniques during the foundation establishment period is much lower. In particular, the exercise that Chen Daoxian cultivated during his qi refining period was Ge Yuan Gong, which was praised as the most suitable foundation for Wan Xinghai. It is easier to switch to other exercises. Normally, as long as Chen Daoxian comprehends the Qinyuan Sword Sutra thoroughly, he will be able to convert the practice in about a year. By the time he can improve his cultivation level again and move towards a higher cultivation level. Of course, the fact that he cannot improve his cultivation this year does not mean that his strength cannot be improved. In fact, Qinyuan Sword Sutra, as a top-level sword cultivator exclusive exercise, can also increase the true essence of sword cultivators like other attribute exercises. Help Jiangxia's true essence reach the limit faster. Chen Daoxian estimated that after the complete revision of the Qinyuan Sword Sutra, the strength of his true essence could increase to 70% to 80% at most. But this 70% to 80% is not achieved overnight. but increase step by step in the process of converting to cultivation techniques this year. So, the following year, although his cultivation can't be improved, his strength will not stop like the period of time when he was polishing his true essence. In front of Ling Tan, Chen Daoxian once again restrained his mind and slowly polished his true essence, which was almost like an arm's finger. Soon, the night has passed. Looking at the white fish maw in the sky, the first rays of sunshine shone on his handsome face, setting him off as if a fairy was in the world. Chen Daoxian opened his eyes. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Subsequently, he recited the Hongming Enlightenment Sutra silently again. If you think about it carefully, he has probably been reciting this scripture since the first time he lit up the sea of consciousness. It has been more than 10 years. But since he discovered the function of Hongming Enlightenment Daojing to store understanding, he has really risen all the way. It can be said that at least 8 of his achievements today are due to this golden scripture. But today, after Chen Daoxian silently recited the Hongming Enlightenment Classic, his face suddenly changed dramatically. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.